Close your eyes and imagine the sound of wind through bamboo, the soft rustle of silk against lacquered armor, the whisper of steel being drawn from its wooden sheath. You are in ancient Japan. The year is 1185. Cherry petals drift across a battlefield where two great clans will decide the fate of a nation. This is where our story begins tonight, not with introductions or explanations, but with you standing in the midst of Japanese history. You will walk alongside warriors whose names became legend. You will witness the birth of a code that still echoes through modern boardrooms and martial arts studios worldwide. Before we begin this journey together, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Tonight, you will experience 15 centuries of samurai history. You will see rice farmers become warriors, warriors become poets, poets become the guardians of an empire's soul. You will walk through mountain temples where monks taught swordsmanship, stand in castle courtyards where tea masters served warlords, witness the final charge of the last samurai. The wind still carries their voices, the bamboo still remembers their footsteps, their story is waiting for you. Let us begin where all great stories start. In the beginning, when Japan was young and warriors were just being born, the mist clears. We find ourselves standing in a different Japan. The year is 300 BCE. There are no samurai yet. No cherry blossoms line the paths. No temples rise from mountainsides. This is the Japan of the Yayoi people. They are discovering something that will change everything. Rice. Watch as families abandon their nomadic hunting grounds. They gather along river valleys, the Kansai Plain, the Kanto Basin, Kyushu's fertile lowlands. Here they plant the first rice paddies. The grain grows in neat rows, green shoots reaching toward the sun. This simple act creates the foundation for everything that follows. Rice changes more than diet. It creates wealth. Some families control more land than others. Some harvest more grain. Inequality begins to emerge from these peaceful fields. The strongest families start to lead. The Yayoi period sees Japan's first social classes forming like sediment in a riverbed. Archaeological evidence tells us stories written in bronze and bone. Burial sites reveal the earliest warrior graves. Clan leaders rest with their weapons. Bronze spearheads catch the light even after 2,000 years. These are not yet samurai swords, but they are the ancestors of those legendary blades. In these burial mounds we see the first hints of warrior culture. A bronze dagger placed beside a chief's skeleton, a wooden shield decorated with spirals. These objects whisper of a society learning to fight, learning to organize, learning to honor those who die in battle. The influence of the great mainland empires reaches across the narrow straits. Chinese merchants bring more than silk and pottery. They carry military concepts, ideas about armor design, weapon forging techniques. The Han Dynasty's military manuals find their way to Japanese shores. Local leaders study these foreign ways of war. Korean kingdoms send their own gifts across the waters. Iron weapons begin to replace bronze. Cavalry techniques arrive with immigrant craftsmen. The Japanese islands absorb these influences like rice paddies absorb spring rain. But they do not simply copy. They adapt. They improve. They make these foreign concepts uniquely their own. Watch the Yamato clan emerge from this period of change. They begin in the Nara Basin, a small group among many, but they possess something their rivals lack: vision. They understand that controlling rice lands means controlling people, that controlling people means controlling the future of these islands. The Yamato leaders make alliances with other clans. They intermarry with powerful families. They adopt Chinese governmental concepts while maintaining Japanese traditions. Slowly, carefully, they weave a web of influence across central Honshu. Their warriors become known for loyalty, for effectiveness, for honor in battle. By 300 CE, the Yamato clan has achieved something remarkable. They are becoming the dominant power in central Japan, not through conquest alone, but through politics, through marriage alliances, through the careful cultivation of warrior loyalty. They are creating the first version of what will become imperial rule. Time moves forward. We stand now beside a massive earthen mound. It rises from the landscape like a green mountain built by human hands. This is a kofun, a keyhole-shaped tomb that will give this entire period its name. Inside lies a warrior king. Around him, the treasures that defined his power. The Kofun period transforms Japan's warrior culture completely. These burial mounds tell us stories that written records cannot. They speak of a society becoming more sophisticated, more stratified, more conscious of rank and ceremony. The mounds themselves are messages carved into the landscape. They announce that the people buried here were not ordinary farmers or fishermen. Excavations reveal the treasures of warrior aristocrats. Iron swords with gold inlay, armor plates crafted with impossible precision, horse gear decorated with bronze bells. These objects travelled thousands of miles to reach these tombs. They came from Korean workshops, Chinese foundries, but they rest here in Japanese soil because Japanese warriors earned them in battle. The introduction of horse warfare changes everything. Before, battles were fought on foot with spears and clubs. Now mounted warriors thunder across rice fields. They wear iron armor that rings like temple bells. They carry long swords that can cleave through wooden shields. They are the direct ancestors of the mounted samurai. Korean influence shapes this transformation. Skilled immigrants arrive from Baekje and Silla kingdoms. They bring advanced metallurgy, superior horse breeding techniques, new concepts of cavalry tactics. But they also bring something more precious. The idea that warrior service creates noble blood. The Uji system develops during these centuries. Family clans become the building blocks of society. Each Uji has its specialty. Some excel at metalworking, others master horse breeding. Still others become known for producing exceptional warriors. These military clans begin to distinguish themselves from farmer families and craftsman groups. Hereditary warrior service becomes established tradition. Sons follow fathers into battle. Training begins in childhood. Boys learn to ride before they can properly walk. They practice with wooden swords while other children play with toys. The warrior path becomes a lifetime commitment passed down through generations. Iron technology revolutionizes weapon making. Japanese swordsmiths study Korean and Chinese techniques, but they begin developing their own methods, their own styles. The curved blade that will eventually become the katana starts to take shape in these early centuries, though it will not reach perfection for hundreds more years. Regional conflicts test these emerging warrior traditions. The Yamato clan fights to maintain its dominance. Other powerful families challenge their authority. Battles rage across Kyushu. Armies clash in the mountains of Honshu. Each conflict teaches valuable lessons about strategy, loyalty, and the price of ambition. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals sophisticated armor designs. Iron plates bound with leather cords, helmets shaped to deflect sword blows. These are not crude barbarian weapons. They represent centuries of refinement, of learning from battle experience, of adapting foreign techniques to Japanese needs. The consolidation of central authority accelerates through the Kofun period. The Yamato clan builds a network of loyal warrior families. They establish themselves as the supreme power in central Japan. But they do not rule through force alone. They create a system based on mutual obligation, on warrior service in exchange for land grants and protection. Buddhism arrives like sunrise after a long night. The year is 538 CE. Korean monks present sacred texts to the Yamato court. These are not merely religious documents. They carry new concepts of government, of social organization, of the relationship between rulers and warriors. Prince Shotoku emerges as the great synthesizer of this era. He understands that Japan must adapt or be conquered by more advanced neighbors. But adaptation does not mean abandoning Japanese traditions. It means blending foreign wisdom with native strength, creating something new from ancient roots. The 17-article constitution changes how warriors think about service. Article 1 speaks of harmony. Article 2 praises the three treasures of Buddhism. but Articles 3 through 17 deal with practical governance, with the duties of officials, with the proper relationship between rulers and subjects. These ideas will eventually evolve into the samurai code of loyalty. Buddhism offers warriors something they have never possessed before, a sophisticated philosophy of life and death. Monks teach that existence is suffering, that attachment leads to sorrow, but they also teach that disciplined practice can lead to enlightenment. These concepts appeal strongly to men who risk death in every battle. Warrior families begin patronizing Buddhist temples. They donate land for monasteries. They fund the copying of sacred texts, but they also begin incorporating Buddhist practices into their military training. Meditation becomes part of warrior discipline. The acceptance of death becomes a spiritual practice. The Taika reforms of 645 CE create the framework for centralized government. These reforms establish the emperor as the source of all authority. They create a system of provinces governed by appointed officials. Most importantly for our story, they establish the principle that all warriors serve ultimately at the emperor's pleasure. Provincial administration requires reliable local leaders. The central government cannot control distant territories through bureaucrats alone. They need warriors who understand local conditions, who can be trusted to enforce imperial will, who possess the military skills to maintain order and defend against threats. These early provincial warriors are not yet samurai in the classic sense, but they possess many characteristics that will define the later warrior class. They serve specific lords. They maintain military households. They train constantly in martial arts. They develop codes of honor that emphasize loyalty above personal safety. Neo-Confucian concepts arrive alongside Buddhism. These Chinese philosophical ideas emphasize hierarchy, social order, the proper relationships between superiors and subordinates. Warriors begin to see themselves not merely as fighters, but as guardians of social harmony, as protectors of the natural order. The influence of Chinese military manuals grows stronger during this period. Japanese warriors study texts on strategy and tactics. They learn about siege warfare, cavalry formations, the coordination of large armies, but they adapt these lessons to Japanese conditions, to smaller-scale conflicts, to the mountainous terrain of their island home. Religious syncretism creates a uniquely Japanese warrior spirituality. Buddhist concepts of discipline merge with Shinto beliefs about ancestral spirits. Confucian ideas about social duty blend with native traditions of clan loyalty. This synthesis will eventually produce the distinctive samurai worldview that balances spiritual refinement with martial effectiveness. The establishment of permanent capitals requires more sophisticated military organization. The Fujiwara capital gives way to Heijo-kyo in Nara. These urban centers need protection from both external threats and internal disorder. The government begins organizing professional military units drawn from warrior families. Regional military commanders begin to emerge as significant political figures. They control not only armies, but also the territories that support those armies. They marry into court families. They accumulate wealth and influence. They begin to see themselves as a distinct social class with its own interests and traditions. The foundations are now complete. The rice-growing economy supports a warrior aristocracy. The Uji clan system creates hereditary military families. Buddhism and Confucianism provide philosophical frameworks for warrior ethics. Central government creates the need for professional military service. All the elements are in place for the emergence of the true samurai class. The wind that rustled through bamboo groves in our opening scene now carries different voices. The whispers of thousands of warriors across 4 centuries, each generation building upon the last, each adding their own innovations to the warrior tradition. The stage is set for the golden age of the Heian court and the rise of the great military clans that will dominate Japanese history for the next 1,000 years. The year is 794. Emperor Kamu gazes across a valley surrounded by mountains. Rivers flow like silver ribbons through the landscape. This will become Kyoto, the capital of peace and tranquility, Heian-kyo, a city designed to last forever. The emperor's architects lay out streets in a perfect grid. They copy the design of Chang'an, the great Chinese capital. But this is not merely imitation. This is transformation. Japanese sensibilities will make this city uniquely their own. The mountains surrounding the valley will protect it. The rivers will nourish it. The harmony between nature and human design will define it. Court life in early Heian reaches heights of refinement never seen before. Aristocrats compose poetry while autumn leaves drift past palace windows. They burn rare incense while discussing the subtle meanings of Chinese classics. Women write novels that capture the hearts of readers 1,000 years later. Men debate the proper colour combinations for court robes while snow falls silently in temple gardens. The Fujiwara family perfects the art of political control without direct rule. They do not seek the throne. Instead, they marry their daughters to emperors. They raise the imperial children. They guide imperial decisions. They become the power behind the throne. Regents who rule in the emperor's name while the emperor studies poetry and practices calligraphy. Lady Murasaki Shizukibu writes her masterpiece during these golden years. The tale of Genji captures the essence of court life. Prince Genji moves through a world of aesthetic perfection. Every gesture carries meaning. Every poem reveals character. Every season brings new opportunities for refined appreciation of beauty. This is the world the court aristocrats have created for themselves. But beyond the capital's borders, a different Japan exists. Frontier territories stretch into the northern mountains. The Emishi people resist imperial expansion. Bandits threaten merchant caravans. Pirates raid coastal villages. The refined gentlemen of the capital cannot handle these rough realities. They need protectors. They need warriors. The court creates the system of shun, private estates granted to aristocratic families. These estates need management. They need protection. They need men who can deal with practical problems, men who can ride horses, men who can fight, men who understand that survival sometimes requires violence. Distance changes everything. A message from Kyoto takes weeks to reach the eastern provinces. By the time court bureaucrats make decisions about frontier problems, those problems have grown worse or disappeared entirely. Local managers must make their own choices. They must develop their own solutions. They must become increasingly independent. The Fujiwara regency system creates an unexpected consequence. As the regent family consolidates power in the capital, other aristocratic families seek opportunities elsewhere. Younger sons who cannot inherit court positions travel to the provinces. They accept positions managing estates. They learn practical skills. They adapt to rougher conditions. Court ceremony becomes more elaborate with each passing decade. The emperor participates in hundreds of annual rituals. Courtiers must memorize thousands of rules about proper behavior, the correct way to arrange flowers, the appropriate response to seasonal poetry, the proper depth of bows for different social ranks. This refinement becomes an end in itself. Music reaches new heights of sophistication. Court orchestras perform pieces that require years of training to master. The biwa lute accompanies epic poetry recitations. Flutes echo through palace corridors like the voices of mountain spirits. But this music exists only within the protected world of the capital. Outside those boundaries, different sounds prevail. The ring of steel on steel. The growing disconnect between capital and provinces becomes a chasm. Court aristocrats view provincial service as exile. They prefer positions that keep them close to the emperor. They would rather compete for ceremonial appointments than accept responsible management roles. This leaves the provinces increasingly under the control of men who have chosen practical skills over cultural refinement. Buddhist temples accumulate vast wealth during this period. They own thousands of acres of tax-free land. They maintain their own administrative systems. Some temples begin organizing their own military forces. Warrior monks called Sohei emerge to protect temple interests. These religious warriors will eventually challenge both court and military authority. The emperor system reaches a paradox during early Heian. The emperor is theoretically absolute ruler. All authority flows from his divine nature, but practical power rests with regent families. Real control belongs to whoever can manage the emperor's daily life. The emperor becomes a sacred figure isolated from actual governance. Trade with Tang China brings cultural treasures to the Heian court. silk textiles of incredible beauty, porcelain that seems to capture moonlight, books containing the wisdom of ancient philosophers, tea that creates moments of perfect calm. These luxuries reinforce the court's sense of superiority over rough provincial life. The Imperial University trains young aristocrats in Chinese classics. They study Confucian philosophy. They memorize historical precedents. They learn to write classical Chinese with perfect elegance. But this education prepares them only for court life. They learn nothing about managing estates, nothing about military command, nothing about the practical skills needed in the provinces. The sun sets over the eastern provinces. A different Japan awakens in these frontier lands. Here, estate managers carry swords alongside their account books. They train in archery after completing their administrative duties. They are becoming something the court has never seen before. Professional warriors who serve aristocratic masters but develop their own military traditions. The word bushi begins to appear in documents from this period. It means warrior gentleman. These men differ from court aristocrats and common soldiers alike. They possess military skills but also cultural accomplishments. They can compose poetry and lead cavalry charges. They serve noble masters but maintain their own family honor. Estate management requires new kinds of skills. Managers must collect taxes from reluctant farmers. They must settle disputes between villages. They must protect valuable crops from bandits and wild animals. They must organize workers for major construction projects. Force becomes a necessary tool for effective administration. Two family names begin to dominate provincial warrior circles, Minamoto and Taira. Both clans trace their ancestry to imperial princes who received these surnames when they left court service. Both develop military reputations through frontier service. Both will eventually compete for supreme power in Japan. The Minamoto clan establishes itself in the eastern provinces. They specialize in mounted warfare. Their horses are larger and stronger than traditional Japanese breeds. Their riders train from childhood to shoot arrows accurately, while galloping at full speed. They develop tactics that combine mobility with devastating firepower. Minamoto warriors perfect the technique of mounted archery. A skilled archer can loose 12 arrows in the time it takes his horse to cover 100 meters. Each arrow flies with lethal accuracy. Enemy formations break before Minamoto cavalry charges. This military effectiveness brings political influence. State owners request Minamoto protection. Court aristocrats offer Minamoto warriors lucrative service contracts. The Taira clan chooses a different path to power. They establish naval capabilities along Japan's coastal waters. Taira ships control important trade routes. They suppress piracy. They transport valuable goods between provinces. Naval power brings different advantages than cavalry excellence, but it leads to the same destination: political influence through military effectiveness. Taira sea power extends their influence beyond traditional land-based authority. They can support allies by sea while enemies remain trapped on isolated land positions. They can transport armies quickly along the coast. They can blockade hostile ports. They control the flow of trade goods that fund military operations. Frontier warfare against the Emishi teaches valuable lessons about irregular combat. Traditional Chinese military manuals assume large armies fighting on open ground, but the northern mountains require different tactics. Small units operating independently, quick strikes followed by rapid withdrawal. Knowledge of local terrain becomes more important than numerical superiority. The Emishi people prove to be formidable opponents. They know every mountain path. They can disappear into forests like spirits. They strike without warning and vanish before reinforcements arrive. Fighting them teaches Japanese warriors the importance of individual skill, the value of personal courage, the necessity of adapting tactics to circumstances. Buddhist philosophy begins influencing warrior culture during this period. Monks teach that existence is suffering, that attachment causes pain, that disciplined practice leads to enlightenment. These concepts appeal to men who face death regularly. They provide frameworks for understanding the warrior's dangerous life. Temple libraries preserve military texts that warriors study during peaceful periods. Chinese classics on strategy and tactics, histories of famous campaigns, technical manuals about weapons and armor. Warriors begin developing their own military literature based on Japanese fighting experience. The concept of karma attracts warrior attention. Actions in this life determine circumstances in future rebirths. Good deeds create good fortune. Evil actions bring terrible consequences. This provides moral guidelines for warriors who must sometimes kill to fulfill their duties. Meditation practice helps warriors develop mental discipline. They learn to control fear during battle. They practice maintaining calm under pressure. They develop the ability to make quick decisions in dangerous situations. Buddhist mental training complements physical martial arts practice. Warrior families begin patronizing Buddhist temples. They donate land for monastery construction. They fund the copying of sacred texts. They invite monks to conduct funeral ceremonies for fallen warriors. Buddhism provides spiritual comfort for the harsh realities of military life. The doctrine of impermanence resonates strongly with warrior experience. All things pass away. Beauty fades. Strength diminishes. Life ends suddenly and unpredictably. Warriors learn to appreciate present moments without clinging to temporary pleasures or fearing inevitable losses. Ancestral veneration takes on new meanings in warrior families. Dead warriors become protective spirits watching over their descendants. Family tombs become shrines where living warriors pray for guidance before important battles. The connection between past and present generations grows stronger. Training methods become more sophisticated as warrior traditions mature. Young men practice with wooden weapons before handling steel. They learn horsemanship through years of daily riding. They study poetry and calligraphy alongside swordsmanship and archery. The ideal warrior combines cultural accomplishments with military effectiveness. Hachiman's shrine stands on a mountainside overlooking the training grounds. Incense smoke drifts across the valley where young warriors practice their skills. This is where the god of war watches over Japan's emerging military class. Hachiman has become more than a deity. He's the spiritual patron of all who follow the way of bow and horse. The warriors gathering at this shrine represent something new in Japanese society. They are not court aristocrats seeking governmental advancement. They are not common soldiers fighting for daily wages. They are professional warriors who serve specific lords while maintaining their own family traditions. They are developing their own code of behavior, their own standards of honor. Morning training begins before dawn. Young men rise in darkness to care for their horses. They check equipment by candlelight. They practice sword forms in empty courtyards while the rest of the world sleeps. This discipline shapes both body and character. It creates the foundation for everything that follows. Mounted archery reaches new levels of perfection during this period. Master archers can hit targets while riding at full gallop. They can shoot accurately in any direction from horseback. They can loose multiple arrows in rapid succession without losing accuracy. This skill distinguishes Japanese warriors from fighters in other countries. The composite bow becomes the primary weapon of the warrior class. These bows require months to construct properly. Bamboo and wood layers bonded with specially prepared glues, horn and sinew adding power and resilience. The finished weapon can drive arrows through armor at remarkable distances. Training with the bow begins in early childhood. Boys start with small practice bows suited to their strength. They learn proper form before they learn to hit targets. They practice daily regardless of weather conditions. They develop the muscle memory that will serve them throughout their warrior careers. Horse breeding becomes a specialized art among warrior families. They import superior stock from mainland Asia. They carefully plan breeding programs to produce animals with specific characteristics. Speed for mounted archery, endurance for long campaigns. The relationship between warrior and horse transcends mere utility. Horses become companions and partners. Warriors name their favorite mounts. They compose poems about horses lost in battle. They bury beloved animals with elaborate ceremonies. The bond between man and horse becomes part of warrior identity. Family lineages begin maintaining detailed records of military service. They preserve accounts of famous battles. They remember the deeds of warrior ancestors. They pass down weapons and armor as sacred family treasures. These traditions create continuity across generations. The concept of family honor develops sophisticated meanings during this period. Individual actions reflect on entire lineages. A warrior's cowardice shames his ancestors and descendants. His courage enhances the reputation of his family name. This creates powerful motivations for proper behavior in dangerous situations. Loyalty becomes the supreme virtue of warrior culture. Not abstract loyalty to distant concepts, but personal loyalty to specific lords. Warriors pledge their lives to serve particular masters. They accept death rather than betray these personal bonds. This creates relationships of extraordinary intensity and commitment. The Genpuku coming-of-age ceremony marks the transition from boy to warrior. Young men receive their first real weapons. They choose their adult names. They formally pledge service to their lords. They accept responsibility for maintaining family honor. This ceremony transforms children into members of the warrior class. Training encompasses more than military skills. Young warriors learn to compose poetry appropriate for various occasions. They study calligraphy until they can write with elegant precision. They practice the tea ceremony and flower arrangement. Cultural accomplishments distinguish the warrior class from common soldiers. The ideal of the warrior poet emerges during this period. Military effectiveness alone is not sufficient for true excellence. The complete warrior must also possess aesthetic sensibilities. He must appreciate seasonal beauty. He must understand classical literature. He must express deep emotions through skillful poetry. Zen Buddhism arrives from China during the later part of this period. Its emphasis on direct experience appeals to warriors who face life and death situations regularly. Zen meditation practices help develop the mental clarity needed for effective combat. The religion's practical orientation matches warrior temperaments. The famous swordsmith families establish their reputations during these centuries. They develop forging techniques that produce blades of unprecedented quality. Each sword becomes a work of art as well as a weapon. Swords acquire individual names and reputations. They are passed down through generations like family treasures. The Taira clan has achieved something unprecedented in Japanese history. They control not only military power but also court influence. Taira no Kiyomori sits at the emperor's right hand. His daughters marry into the imperial family. His sons hold the highest governmental positions. The warriors have finally gained access to the refined world they once served from a distance. But success creates unexpected problems. Court life softens warrior edge. Luxury weakens military discipline. Political maneuvering replaces battlefield prowess. The Taira begin to lose the very qualities that brought them to power. They become aristocrats who happen to possess military backgrounds rather than warriors who serve aristocratic masters. Kiyomori's grandson sits on the imperial throne. Taira family members govern the most important provinces. Taira supporters hold crucial military commands throughout the country. The clan has achieved total domination of both court and military systems. But total power creates total resentment among excluded families. The Minamoto clan watches these developments from forced exile. They remember their own period of court influence. They recall when Minamoto warriors served as the emperor's champions. Now they live as country gentlemen managing remote estates. But they have not forgotten their military traditions. They have not abandoned their political ambitions. Minamoto Yoritomo grows to manhood in Izu province. His father died fighting the Taira. His brothers were killed or exiled. He lives under constant surveillance by Taira officials. But exile teaches valuable lessons. He learns to judge character. He develops patience. He understands the importance of careful planning. The Hogan disturbance of 1156 marks the beginning of warrior involvement in court politics. Retired Emperor Sutoku challenges his brother Emperor Go Shirakawa for supreme authority. Both sides recruit warrior allies. The Minamoto clan splits its support between the rivals. The Taira support Go Shirakawa and emerge victorious. Military force decides the succession dispute. Arrows fly within the imperial palace grounds. Swords ring in temple courtyards. Warriors burn the residences of their enemies. the refined world of court politics discovers that ultimate authority flows from the sharp edge of the blade. The Heiji disturbance of 1159 escalates warrior involvement in governmental affairs. Minamoto Yoshitomo attempts to eliminate Taira influence at court. He captures the emperor and former emperor. He controls the palace complex. But Taira reinforcements arrive from the provinces. The Minamoto plot fails catastrophically. Taira victory in the Heiji disturbance eliminates their major rivals. Most adult Minamoto men die in battle or face execution afterward. The survivors scatter to remote provinces or enter religious life. The Taira achieve unchallenged military supremacy. They believe their enemies are permanently destroyed. But Kiyomori makes a crucial error. He spares the lives of several young Minamoto boys. Compassion prevents him from ordering their execution. Instead, he sends them into exile or monastic seclusion. This mercy will eventually cost the Taira everything they have gained. The years following Heiji witness unprecedented Taira dominance. Kiyomori becomes the real ruler of Japan while emperors perform ceremonial functions. Taira family members hold half the provincial governorships. Taira supporters control the most profitable trade routes. The clan accumulates wealth beyond imagination. Success changes the Taira character. They build magnificent palaces that rival imperial residences. They collect art treasures from across Asia. They patronize poets and musicians. They adopt the refined lifestyle of court aristocrats. But this transformation weakens their military capabilities. Provincial warrior families begin to resent Taira dominance. Local leaders who once welcomed Taira protection now chafe under Taira control. The clan demands higher taxes from estate owners. They interfere with traditional local arrangements. They appoint outsiders to positions once held by provincial families. Buddhist monasteries develop their own grievances against Taira rule. The warrior monks of Mount Hiei and Kofukuji Temple have grown accustomed to political independence. They maintain their own armies. They control vast territories. But the Taira attempt to bring them under central authority. Economic problems create additional tensions throughout the country. Poor harvests reduce tax collections. Trade disruptions affect merchant profits. Currency debasements hurt everyone who depends on monetary transactions. People begin to blame the Taira for these hardships. Signs of approaching conflict multiply during the late 1170s. Provincial warriors sharpen their weapons and train their horses. Monasteries stockpile supplies and recruit additional warrior monks. Retired emperors cultivate relationships with anti-Taira elements. Everyone senses that the current situation cannot continue indefinitely. Prince Mochihito begins secret communications with potential allies. As an imperial prince excluded from succession, he has legitimate grievances against the current system. He particularly resents Taira control over imperial marriages and court appointments. He starts planning resistance to Taira dominance. The stage is set for the most decisive conflict in Japanese history. All the elements are in place for a war that will determine whether court aristocrats or military families will control Japan's future. The refined world of Heian culture faces the rising power of provincial warrior traditions. The outcome will reshape Japanese civilization forever. In distant Izu province, Minamoto Yoritomo receives reports about growing tensions at court. He maintains careful neutrality while secretly preparing for opportunities that may arise. The patient exile watches and waits. His time is coming. The year is 1180. Prince Mochihito sits in his residence as cherry petals fall outside his windows. The spring air carries the scent of flowers and the whisper of conspiracy. Tonight, he will write the letter that destroys the Taira clan. His brush moves across silk paper with careful deliberation. Each character seals the fate of thousands. The Taira have violated heaven and earth, he writes. They have destroyed the imperial line and brought suffering to the people. All loyal subjects must rise against these traitors. The prince rolls the scroll carefully. He applies his personal seal. Messengers will carry copies across Japan. The call to war has begun. Minamoto Yoritomo receives the prince's message at his modest residence in Izu province. 20 years of exile have taught him patience. He reads the letter 3 times before responding. Other Minamoto survivors might rush to raise their banners immediately. Yoritomo understands that timing means everything in warfare. He sends secret messages to provincial warrior families throughout eastern Japan. Not open calls to rebellion, careful inquiries about local conditions, subtle reminders of old loyalties, quiet promises about future rewards. The methodical exile begins building the coalition that will topple Taira power. The first battle occurs at Ishibashiyama near Yoritomo's stronghold. 300 Minamoto warriors face 3,000 Taira troops. The outcome seems inevitable, but numbers alone do not determine victory. The Minamoto fight with desperate courage, while their enemies expect easy triumph. Arrows darken the sky like storm clouds. Steel rings against steel in the mountain darkness. Men scream battle cries that echo off rocky slopes. The Minamoto lose this engagement. Yoritomo barely escapes with his life. But the defeat becomes a strategic victory. It proves the Taira can be challenged. Yoritomo retreats across Sagami Bay to the fishing village of Kamakura. This remote settlement sits surrounded by mountains and sea, defensible terrain for a growing rebellion. Here, away from court luxury and political intrigue, he will build something entirely new, a government of warriors for warriors. Reinforcements arrive daily at the Kamakura camp. Warriors who remember Minamoto glory days. Young men seeking adventure and advancement. Veterans tired of Taira arrogance. Each new arrival strengthens Yoritomo's position. His small rebellion becomes a regional uprising. The Battle of Fujigawa demonstrates how quickly fortunes can change in warfare. Massive Taira armies march eastward to crush the Minamoto rebellion. They camp beside the river with complete confidence. Their commanders plan victory celebrations before the fighting begins. But overconfidence creates carelessness. Waterbirds rise suddenly from the river in the pre-dawn darkness. Their wings beat like thunder in the still air. Nervous Taira sentries mistake the sound for approaching cavalry. Panic spreads through the camp like wildfire. Soldiers flee without seeing a single enemy. The mighty Taira army retreats in disgrace without fighting. Word of Fujigawa spreads across Japan within weeks. The invincible Taira have revealed their weakness. Provincial warriors who hesitated to join the rebellion now commit their support to Yoritomo. The balance of power shifts dramatically toward the Minamoto cause, but Yoritomo faces a crucial decision about military strategy. Should he march immediately on Kyoto while Taira morale remains shattered? His advisors urge aggressive action. Strike now before enemies can recover. But the methodical leader chooses a different path. He will consolidate eastern Japan before advancing westward. This decision creates tension within the Minamoto family. Yoritomo's brilliant half-brother Yoshitsune arrives at Kamakura eager for action. The young warrior possesses natural military genius. He understands battlefield tactics instinctively, but he lacks patience for careful political planning. Yoshitsune leads Minamoto forces in the campaign against Taira strongholds in western Japan. His tactical innovations revolutionize medieval warfare. At Ichinotani, he leads cavalry down impossible mountain slopes to attack enemy positions from behind. The Taira fortress falls in hours rather than months. The final confrontation occurs at Dan no Ura in the straits between Honshu and Kyushu. Taira naval forces face Minamoto fleets in the narrow waters. This will be the decisive battle of the entire war. Victory here will determine Japan's future for centuries. The child Emperor Antoku sails with the Taira fleet. He's only 8 years old, but he carries the sacred regalia that legitimizes imperial authority. The sacred sword, mirror, and jewels that connect him to the sun goddess Amaterasu. Their loss would shatter imperial claims to divine ancestry. Naval warfare requires different skills than land battles. Archers must compensate for ship movement when aiming at targets. Boarding parties need specialized weapons for close combat on deck. Weather and tides become crucial tactical factors. Yoshitsune adapts quickly to these new conditions. The tide turns during the battle in more ways than one. Taira ships find themselves fighting against swift currents as well as enemy arrows. Their formations break apart. Individual vessels become isolated and vulnerable. Minamoto forces overwhelm them systematically. The Taira face inevitable defeat as their fleet disintegrates. Rather than suffer capture and execution, the Imperial women make a final tragic choice. They will join their emperor in death. The child Antoku's grandmother takes him in her arms. "Beneath the waves lies another capital," she whispers. They plunge into the dark waters together. The sacred regalia disappears beneath the waves with the drowned emperor. Divers search frantically for the treasures. They recover the sacred mirror and jewels. But the sword remains lost in the depths forever. This loss will haunt imperial legitimacy for centuries to come. Taira power ends with Dan no Ura. The surviving clan members flee to distant provinces or enter religious life. Their supporters scatter like leaves before autumn winds. The age of warrior government begins as court aristocrats learn they can no longer control the armed men who serve them. Yoritomo returns to Kamakura as undisputed master of Japan, but victory creates new problems. How should a warrior government relate to the imperial court? What institutions can control thousands of armed retainers? How can military efficiency coexist with traditional imperial authority? The fishing village of Kamakura transforms into Japan's second capital. Craftsmen arrive to build residences for warrior administrators. Merchants establish shops to serve the growing population. Temples rise to provide spiritual guidance for the new ruling class. But this capital differs fundamentally from elegant Kyoto. No elaborate palaces grace Kamakura's streets. No court ceremonies consume endless hours. No aesthetic competitions distract from practical business. This is a working capital designed for efficiency rather than display. Warriors conduct business in simple wooden buildings while wearing everyday clothing. Yoritomo establishes 3 governmental offices that will define samurai administration for centuries. The Mandakoro handles financial affairs and general policy. The Samurai Dokoro manages military personnel and equipment. The Monchujo administers justice and legal disputes. Each office focuses on practical results rather than ceremonial precedents. The Mandakoro becomes the nerve center of the new government. Here, administrators track tax revenues from hundreds of estates. They plan military campaigns and coordinate troop movements. They maintain correspondence with provincial commanders throughout Japan. Efficient record-keeping replaces elegant poetry as the primary administrative skill. The Samurai Dokoro creates the first professional military bureaucracy in Japanese history. Officers maintain detailed records of warrior service. They track the distribution of rewards after successful campaigns. They organize training programs and equipment standards. Military excellence becomes a measurable commodity rather than a romantic ideal. The Monchujo establishes warrior law as a legitimate alternative to court precedents. Disputes between samurai require judges who understand military customs. Land grants and inheritance rights need legal frameworks suited to warrior society. Traditional court law proves inadequate for these new requirements. Dual authority emerges as the fundamental characteristic of Japan's new political system. The emperor retains ceremonial supremacy and control over court appointments, but the shogun exercises practical power over military affairs and provincial administration. This arrangement satisfies both imperial dignity and warrior effectiveness. The Gokunin system creates direct bonds between individual warriors and the shogun. Each Gokunin swears personal loyalty to Yoritomo in exchange for land grants and protection. This relationship bypasses traditional aristocratic intermediaries. Warriors serve the shogun directly rather than through court nobles. Personal loyalty becomes the foundation of the entire governmental system. Warriors pledge their lives to serve the shogun faithfully. They accept his commands without question. They sacrifice personal interests for his benefit. In return, the shogun protects their lands and advances their careers. The Gokunin obligation includes specific military duties. Warriors must respond to mobilization orders within specified time limits. They must maintain prescribed equipment and training standards. They must provide military service for designated periods each year. These requirements create Japan's first systematic military organization. Land grants reward loyal service and fund future military obligations. The shogun distributes confiscated Taira territories among his supporters. But these grants carry conditions. Recipients must use the land to support their military households. They must be prepared to serve when called upon. Zen Buddhism arrives from China during this period of institutional creation. Its emphasis on direct experience through meditation appeals to warriors who face life and death situations regularly. Zen masters teach practical techniques for developing mental clarity and emotional control under pressure. The famous Zen master Asai establishes the first Zen temple in Kamakura. He teaches that enlightenment comes through disciplined practice rather than academic study. This message resonates with warriors who value practical results over theoretical knowledge. Zen becomes the spiritual foundation of samurai culture. Meditation practice helps warriors develop crucial mental skills. They learn to maintain calm during battle. They practice making quick decisions under pressure. They develop the ability to accept death without fear. These psychological tools complement physical martial arts training. The relationship between Zen and warrior training creates new approaches to martial arts. Sword practice becomes a form of moving meditation. Archery develops into a spiritual discipline as well as military skill. Every aspect of warrior training acquires deeper philosophical meaning. Yoritomo's death in 1190 stunning creates a succession crisis that transforms the Kamakura system. His sons lack their father's political skills. They cannot control the warrior coalition that brought the Minamoto to power. The Hojo family, Yoritomo's in-laws, seize the opportunity to establish their own dominance. The Hojo do not claim the shogunal title for themselves. Instead, they rule as shiken, regents who govern in the name of puppet shoguns. This arrangement parallels the Fujiwara regency over emperors centuries earlier, but the Hojo exercise real power rather than mere ceremonial influence. Hojo Tokimasa becomes the first shiken after eliminating potential rivals within the Minamoto family. He demonstrates that political skill can triumph over hereditary claims. The regency system proves more stable than direct Minamoto rule because it separates real authority from symbolic legitimacy. The Jito system extends Kamakura authority throughout Japan. Jito serve as local administrators on individual estates. They collect taxes for the central government. They maintain order in rural districts. They represent shogunal interests in every corner of the country. The Shugo system creates military governors for entire provinces. Shugo command regional warrior forces. They coordinate defense against external threats. They suppress local rebellions. They serve as intermediaries between the central government and provincial warrior families. These administrative innovations create the most effective governmental system Japan has ever possessed. The Jito and Shugo provide local representation for central authority. They adapt national policies to regional conditions. They maintain stability while preserving local autonomy. The Joi Code of 1232 establishes the first comprehensive legal framework designed specifically for warrior society. Traditional court law cannot address the practical needs of military families. Warriors require clear guidelines about inheritance rights, military obligations, and dispute resolution. The code addresses crucial issues that court law ignores. How should military equipment be inherited when fathers die? What obligations do warriors owe to multiple lords? How should land disputes between warrior families be resolved? These practical questions require practical answers. Legal precedent becomes more important than theoretical principle in warrior law. Judges consider how similar cases were decided previously. They value practical outcomes over abstract justice. This approach creates a flexible legal system that adapts to changing circumstances. The Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281 test the Kamakura system's military effectiveness. Kublai Khan's massive fleets threaten Japan with foreign conquest for the first time in its history. The invasion attempts mobilize the entire warrior class in defense of their homeland. The first invasion lands on Kyushu beaches in 1274. Mongol tactics differ completely from traditional Japanese warfare. They fight in mass formations using coordinated archery volleys. They employ explosive weapons and siege engines. Japanese warriors must adapt quickly to these foreign methods. Individual samurai courage proves insufficient against Mongol organization. Japanese warriors traditionally fight single combats while announcing their names and lineages. The Mongols ignore these conventions and attack in overwhelming numbers. Traditional samurai tactics require rapid modification. The invasions create the first truly national military effort in Japanese history. Warriors from every province respond to mobilization orders. They leave their estates to fight on distant battlefields. They sacrifice personal interests for collective defense against foreign threats. The legendary kamikaze or divine wind destroys both Mongol fleets before they can establish permanent footholds in Japan. Typhoons scatter the invasion forces and sink hundreds of ships. This divine intervention reinforces Japanese beliefs about their nation's special protection by the gods. The successful defense against Mongol invasion creates new problems for the Kamakura government. Warriors expect rewards for their military service, but there are no conquered territories to distribute, no defeated enemies to tax for compensation. The government cannot satisfy its supporters' expectations. Economic strain from constant military preparedness weakens the entire warrior class. Maintaining weapons and equipment costs money that many families do not possess. Extended military service prevents warriors from managing their estates effectively. Financial difficulties create widespread discontent. The refinement of Bushido ideals occurs during this period of external threat and internal pressure. Warriors develop more sophisticated codes of behavior. They emphasize loyalty, courage, and self-sacrifice as supreme virtues. They create philosophical frameworks that justify their privileged social position. The first Mongol invasion fleet appears off Kyushu like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Samurai defenders have never seen ships of such size. They carry armies larger than entire Japanese provinces. The foreign warriors wear unfamiliar armor and carry strange weapons. Everything about this threat challenges traditional Japanese military assumptions. Mongol combat tactics shock the defending samurai. Enemy formations advance in disciplined ranks rather than individual challenges. They coordinate their movements like dancers performing complex choreography. They use explosive devices that create thunder and smoke. Japanese warriors must abandon centuries of military tradition to survive. The samurai adapt with remarkable speed to these new combat requirements. They learn to fight in coordinated units rather than individual duels. They develop tactics for dealing with mass archery volleys. They study captured Mongol equipment to understand foreign military technology. But adaptation comes at a psychological cost. The traditional warrior code emphasizes individual glory and personal honor. Mass combat reduces samurai to anonymous soldiers in large formations. The heroic ideals of warrior culture conflict with practical military necessity. The typhoon that destroys the first invasion fleet seems to vindicate traditional Japanese beliefs about divine protection. The gods have intervened directly to save Japan from foreign conquest. This divine wind proves that Japan possesses special spiritual defenses against external enemies. Preparations for the second invasion consume the next 7 years. The Kamakura government mobilizes resources throughout Japan for coastal defense. Warriors abandon their estates to man fortifications along Kyushu beaches. The entire country becomes an armed camp preparing for renewed Mongol attack. The stone wall built along Hakata Bay represents the largest military engineering project in Japanese history. Thousands of workers quarry stones from distant mountains. They transport massive blocks to the construction site. They build fortifications designed to stop foreign armies from landing on Japanese soil. The second invasion of 1281 brings an even larger Mongol force to Japanese waters. The combined Chinese and Korean fleets carry over 100,000 troops. This invasion force exceeds the population of most Japanese provinces. Its success would end Japanese independence permanently. The legendary kamikaze strikes again during the second invasion attempt. An even more powerful typhoon destroys the Mongol fleet completely. Few foreign soldiers survive to return to China. The divine wind has saved Japan twice from foreign conquest. The double victory over Mongol invasion creates unprecedented national unity. Warriors from every region have fought together against common enemies. They have shared dangers and sacrifices. They have proven their collective strength against the greatest military power in Asia. But victory creates unexpected problems for the warrior class. The government has no conquered territories to distribute as rewards. No defeated enemies provide tribute payments. Warriors who expected compensation for their military service receive only expressions of gratitude. Financial crisis spreads throughout samurai society during the late Kamakura period. Extended military service has prevented proper estate management. Equipment costs have consumed family savings. Many warrior households face bankruptcy despite their military success. The Tokusei debt cancellation edicts provide temporary relief for struggling warriors. The government periodically cancels debts that samurai owe to merchants and moneylenders. But these measures merely postpone economic problems rather than solving them. Growing discontent among warrior families weakens the Kamakura government's political foundation. The Hojo Regency depends on samurai loyalty for its authority. When that loyalty erodes due to economic hardship, the entire system becomes vulnerable to challenge. Emperor Go-Daigo begins his restoration movement by appealing directly to discontented warriors. He promises to eliminate the dual authority system that divides power between court and military government. He offers to reward loyal supporters with positions in a restored imperial administration. The emperor's supporters include both court nobles who resent warrior dominance and warriors who feel betrayed by the Kamakura government. This unlikely alliance demonstrates how thoroughly the existing system has lost legitimacy among its former supporters. Secret communications spread throughout Japan as Go-Daigo builds his revolutionary coalition. Coded messages pass between monasteries and warrior strongholds. Trusted messengers carry promises of reward for those who support imperial restoration. The conspiracy grows steadily stronger. The discovery of the imperial plot forces Go-Daigo into open rebellion. Kamakura forces attempt to capture the emperor and his supporters. But the rebellion spreads faster than government troops can suppress it. Regional commanders begin declaring independence from Hojo authority. Ashikaga Takauji represents the new generation of warriors who feel no personal loyalty to the Kamakura system. He commands significant military forces but receives inadequate rewards for his service. The emperor's promises of advancement appeal to his ambitious nature. The defection of major warrior leaders dooms the Kamakura government. When commanders like Takauji join the imperial cause, they bring their armies with them. The Hojo Regency cannot survive when its own supporters abandon it for the enemy. The final assault on Kamakura occurs in 1333 when multiple enemy armies converge on the city simultaneously. Hojo defenders fight courageously but face overwhelming odds. The regency that has governed Japan for over a century collapses within days. The end comes with characteristic warrior drama. The last Hojo regent and his supporters commit seppuku rather than face capture. They choose death over dishonor. Their suicides mark the end of the Kamakura period and the beginning of a new chapter in Japanese history. The smoke clears over the ruins of Kamakura. Emperor Go-Daigo sits in his temporary palace gazing at reports from across Japan. The impossible has happened. Imperial authority has been restored. The warrior government lies in ashes. But victory creates problems the emperor never anticipated. Go-Daigo dreams of returning to the golden age of imperial rule. He wants to govern directly without military intermediaries. He plans to restore court ceremonies that have been neglected for decades. He envisions a renaissance of classical learning and artistic achievement. The warrior class will serve the throne as humble retainers rather than independent power holders. But Japan in 1333 differs completely from the Japan of the early Heian period. Centuries of warrior rule have created new social structures. Provincial families have grown accustomed to local autonomy. Military households depend on land grants that support their fighting men. The emperor cannot simply erase these developments with imperial proclamations. Administrative chaos spreads throughout the country as Go-Daigo attempts to implement his restoration program. Court nobles who have no experience with practical governance receive important appointments. They issue contradictory orders to provincial commanders. They demand taxes from territories that cannot pay. They promise rewards they cannot deliver. The warrior families who supported the imperial cause grow increasingly frustrated with court incompetence. They sacrificed blood and treasure to destroy the Kamakura system. They expected generous compensation for their loyalty. Instead, they receive ceremonial titles and empty promises from aristocrats who understand poetry better than politics. Ashikaga Takauji watches these developments with growing skepticism. He commands the most powerful military forces among the emperor's supporters. His armies control the strategic approaches to Kyoto. His cooperation remains essential for imperial security. But his patience erodes with each administrative failure. Takauji represents a new generation of warrior leaders. He feels no romantic attachment to imperial ideology. He judges political systems by their practical effectiveness rather than their theoretical legitimacy. The Kemu restoration fails this pragmatic test completely. The emperor's attempt to reduce warrior privileges creates open antagonism between court and military supporters. Go-Daigo issues proclamations limiting samurai land rights. He appoints court nobles to positions previously held by warriors. He reduces military budgets while increasing expenditures for court ceremonies. Regional commanders begin ignoring imperial orders they consider unreasonable. They maintain their existing administrative arrangements rather than implementing court reforms. They collect taxes according to established precedents rather than new imperial demands. Effective government disappears as central and local authorities work at cross purposes. The breaking point arrives when Go-Daigo attempts to remove Takauji from his military commands. The emperor fears the general's growing power and independence, but this fear leads to the very confrontation Go-Daigo hopes to avoid. Takauji refuses to surrender his positions. Open warfare becomes inevitable. The conflict between emperor and general splits the imperial coalition. Some warriors remain loyal to Go-Daigo from personal conviction or material interest. Others support Takauji because they trust military leadership more than court administration. The restoration movement collapses into civil war. Takauji's pragmatic approach to the succession crisis demonstrates his political realism. Rather than claiming imperial authority for himself, he installs a rival emperor who will cooperate with warrior government. This creates the northern court in Kyoto, while Go-Daigo establishes his southern court in the Yoshino Mountains. The northern and southern courts' conflict defines Japanese politics for the next 60 years. Each side claims legitimate imperial authority. Each recruits warrior supporters with promises of land grants and positions. Each maintains elaborate court ceremonies to demonstrate legitimacy. But real power belongs to whoever controls the strongest armies. The Nambokucho period sees Japanese warriors fighting for competing imperial claims rather than personal or family interests. This ideological warfare differs from previous conflicts motivated primarily by material considerations. Warriors develop sophisticated arguments about imperial legitimacy and governmental theory. Takauji establishes his shogunate in Kyoto rather than creating a separate military capital. This decision reflects his understanding that effective government requires integration of military and civil authority. He will not repeat the Kamakura mistake of separating warrior administration from imperial court functions. Warrior participation in court culture increases dramatically under the early Ashikaga shoguns. Military families study classical literature and practice poetry composition. They patronize Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines. They collect art treasures and sponsor cultural events. The warrior class begins its transformation from crude fighters to cultured gentlemen. Shogun Ashikaga Yoshimitsu ascends to power in 1368 with ambitions that extend far beyond military dominance. He envisions creating a warrior culture that rivals the greatest achievements of imperial civilization. His court will produce art and literature worthy of the classical masters. His warriors will become philosopher-poets as well as skilled fighters. The Kitayama Palace rises in the hills north of Kyoto like a vision from paradise. Gardens designed by master landscapers reflect the four seasons in miniature. Pavilions built of precious woods house treasures collected from across Asia. Every detail demonstrates the shogun's commitment to aesthetic excellence. The Golden Pavilion becomes the crown jewel of Yoshimitsu's architectural achievements. Its 3 stories represent different philosophical traditions. The ground floor reflects aristocratic residential style. The middle floor expresses samurai simplicity and strength. The top floor embodies Zen Buddhist spirituality and transcendence. Gold leaf covering the upper stories catches sunlight like captured fire. The building seems to float above its reflecting pond like a celestial palace descended to earth. Visitors approach through gardens that prepare their minds for spiritual contemplation. Architecture becomes philosophy expressed in wood and gold. Yoshimitsu's court attracts artists and intellectuals from throughout Japan and beyond. Chinese painters bring new techniques for capturing natural beauty. Korean craftsmen share advanced methods of ceramic production. Japanese masters develop innovative approaches that synthesize foreign influences with native traditions. The revival of trade with Ming China brings unprecedented cultural exchange. Chinese merchants carry more than silk and porcelain. They transport books containing the latest developments in philosophy and science. They bring news about artistic innovations in the Imperial Chinese court. They provide access to the broader East Asian cultural sphere. Official diplomatic relations with China elevate Japan's international status. The Ming Emperor recognizes Yoshimitsu as King of Japan in formal correspondence. Japanese diplomatic missions travel to Beijing with tribute gifts and cultural exchanges. China treats Japan as an equal partner rather than a peripheral barbarian kingdom. No theatre develops under Yoshimitsu's direct patronage. The great dramatist Xiaomi creates performance techniques that will define classical Japanese theatre forever. No combines elements of dance, music and poetry into a unified artistic experience. The plays explore themes of spiritual transcendence and the impermanence of worldly existence. Yoshimitsu himself performs in no productions before audiences of court nobles and foreign diplomats. A ruling shogun dancing on stage would have scandalized earlier generations of warriors. But the Ashikaga court embraces artistic expression as a legitimate form of political authority. The aesthetic philosophy underlying no theatre influences all aspects of warrior culture during this period. Beauty becomes a path to spiritual understanding. Artistic refinement demonstrates inner cultivation. The warrior who can appreciate subtle aesthetic experiences proves his worthiness to rule others. Zen Buddhism reaches its greatest influence on warrior culture during the Ashikaga Golden Age. Zen masters serve as political advisors as well as spiritual teachers. They help design gardens that express Buddhist philosophical principles. They influence artistic patronage and cultural policy throughout the shogunate. The famous Zen monk Ikkyu embodies the unconventional spirituality that appeals to warriors of this era. He frequents taverns and pleasure quarters while maintaining rigorous meditation practice. He writes poetry that celebrates both spiritual enlightenment and earthly pleasures. His approach demonstrates that true understanding transcends conventional religious categories. Zen rock gardens represent the ultimate synthesis of warrior aesthetics and Buddhist philosophy. These seemingly simple arrangements of stones and raked gravel require years of contemplation to appreciate fully. They express profound truths about existence without using words or conventional symbols. The tea ceremony begins its development during this period as Zen monks and warriors explore the spiritual dimensions of simple activities. Preparing and sharing tea becomes a form of moving meditation. Every gesture carries meaning. Every utensil possesses aesthetic significance. Ordinary actions become opportunities for transcendent experience. Poetry composition reaches new heights of sophistication among warrior families. The linked verse form called renga allows multiple poets to collaborate on single compositions. Warriors gather for poetry parties that last entire nights. They compete to create the most elegant expressions of seasonal beauty or philosophical insight. Painting styles evolved to reflect warrior sensibilities and Zen influence. Inkwash paintings capture natural scenes with minimal brushstrokes. The empty spaces in compositions become as important as the depicted elements. Viewers must use imagination to complete what artists only suggest. The warrior as cultural patron emerges as a new social ideal during this period. Military effectiveness alone no longer defines samurai excellence. The succession crisis begins with a question that has destroyed dynasties throughout history. Shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa has no male heir. His brother Yoshimi prepares to inherit the shogunate. But then Yoshimasa's wife gives birth to a son. Suddenly, two candidates claim legitimate succession rights. The choice between them will tear Japan apart. Powerful warrior families align themselves with different succession candidates. The Hosokawa clan supports Yoshimi's claim to preserve existing arrangements. The Yamana family backs the infant son, hoping to gain influence during a long regency. Personal ambitions disguise themselves as principal positions about legitimate succession. The conflict escalates beyond mere succession dispute. Regional lords use the crisis to settle old grievances against rivals. They recruit armies ostensibly to support imperial or shogunal authority. But their real goals involve territorial expansion and increased political influence. The succession question becomes the excuse for nationwide civil war. Kyoto becomes the primary battleground as opposing armies converge on the capital. The refined city that symbolized Japanese cultural achievement transforms into an armed camp. Elegant palaces become fortresses. Beautiful gardens hide defensive earthworks. Art treasures disappear into storage or suffer destruction in street fighting. The Onin War officially begins in 1467 when Hosokawa and Yamana forces clash in Kyoto's residential districts. Neither side achieves quick victory. Both armies settle into defensive positions throughout the city. What began as a succession dispute becomes a decade-long siege that destroys Japan's cultural center. Urban warfare requires different tactics than traditional battlefield encounters. Soldiers fight house to house through narrow streets. They use fire as a weapon against wooden buildings. They fortify temples and shrines for defensive positions. The elegant capital becomes a maze of barricades and burned ruins. The destruction of Kyoto represents more than military damage. Centuries of cultural accumulation disappear in flames. Libraries containing irreplaceable manuscripts burn to ash. Art collections assembled over generations scatter or perish. The physical embodiments of Japanese civilization suffer irreparable losses. Provincial commanders grow tired of fighting for abstract succession claims, while their own territories face practical problems. They begin withdrawing their forces from Kyoto to deal with local challenges. The central conflict loses participants as regional concerns take priority over national politics. The concept of Gekukujo, the lower overthrowing the higher, emerges during this period of social chaos. Traditional hierarchies collapse when central authority disappears. Provincial lords declare independence from shogunal control. Local administrators seize control from appointed governors. Social mobility increases dramatically as established orders break down. Warrior families previously excluded from power exploit the chaos to advance their positions. They recruit armies from displaced farmers and unemployed soldiers. They capture territory from weakened rivals. They establish independent domains based on military effectiveness rather than hereditary legitimacy. The Onin War officially ends in 1477 when exhausted commanders sign peace agreements. But real peace does not return to Japan. The central government lacks strength to enforce its authority. Regional lords maintain their armies and independence. The country fragments into dozens of autonomous territories. The shogun Yoshimasa withdraws from active government to pursue artistic interests. He builds the Silver Pavilion as a retreat for aesthetic contemplation. While Japan burns in civil war, its nominal ruler devotes himself to poetry, tea ceremony, and garden design. This withdrawal symbolizes the complete breakdown of effective central authority. The tea ceremony evolves during this period of political chaos into something approaching a complete philosophy of life. Sen no Rikyu, the great tea master, teaches that preparing tea properly requires years of spiritual discipline. Every movement must express perfect harmony. Every utensil must demonstrate aesthetic refinement. The ceremony becomes a refuge from the violence outside. Warriors gather in tiny tea houses where social rank temporarily disappears. Daimyo and retainers kneel together on tatami mats. They share simple meals and appreciate humble ceramic bowls. The tea ceremony creates spaces of peace and equality within a society dominated by warfare and hierarchy. The aesthetic principles governing tea ceremony influence all aspects of warrior culture. Wei represents harmony between participants and natural surroundings. Kei expresses respectful consideration for others. Sei demands absolute cleanliness and purity. Jaku seeks tranquil acceptance of present circumstances. These concepts provide psychological tools for dealing with constant military uncertainty. Warriors facing death in battle can find meaning through aesthetic appreciation of simple experiences. The beauty of morning mist on tea bowls becomes as significant as victory in combat. Spiritual refinement compensates for material insecurity. Martial arts training integrates increasingly with spiritual discipline during this period. Swordsmen study Zen meditation to develop mental clarity under pressure. They practice calligraphy to improve hand control and aesthetic sensitivity. They compose poetry to express the philosophical dimensions of warrior experience. The famous swordsman Miyamoto Musashi exemplifies this integration of martial and aesthetic accomplishment. His treatise on strategy, The Book of Five Rings, combines practical fighting techniques with profound philosophical insights. He creates paintings and sculptures that demonstrate the same principles governing his swordplay. Musashi teaches that mastering any art requires understanding universal principles that apply across all disciplines. The concentration needed for perfect brushstrokes resembles the focus required for deadly sword techniques. The timing sense developed through music practice enhances combat effectiveness. All arts become different expressions of unified understanding. Poetry composition reaches new levels of sophistication among warrior families. The haiku form emerges as the perfect expression of samurai aesthetic sensibility. 17 syllables capture moments of natural beauty or spiritual insight. The extreme brevity requires precise word choice and deep emotional resonance. Basho, the greatest haiku poet, wanders throughout Japan observing seasonal changes and human experiences. His poems express the impermanence that warriors understand intimately. Cherry blossoms fall, snow melts, life passes quickly. These observations provide philosophical frameworks for accepting mortality. Castle architecture develops revolutionary innovations during the Sengoku period. The traditional palace compounds cannot withstand new weapons and siege techniques. Engineers design massive stone foundations supporting multi-story wooden superstructures. These castles combine defensive effectiveness with aesthetic sophistication. Himeji Castle represents the pinnacle of Japanese defensive architecture. Its multiple gates create killing zones for attacking enemies. Its interconnected buildings allow defenders to move safely between positions. But the castle also demonstrates artistic achievement through elegant roof lines and perfectly proportioned structures. The integration of beauty and function in castle design reflects broader warrior values during this period. Military effectiveness remains essential for survival. But aesthetic accomplishment distinguishes the cultured warrior from the mere soldier. The complete samurai combines deadly skills with artistic sensitivity. Portuguese traders arrive in 1543 bringing revolutionary military technology. Firearms transform Japanese warfare within decades. Traditional armor becomes obsolete against musket balls. Castle walls require modification to resist cannon bombardment. The introduction of gunpowder weapons changes everything about military affairs. Japanese craftsmen master European firearm manufacturing techniques with remarkable speed. They improve upon Portuguese designs by creating more reliable firing mechanisms. They develop mass production methods that supply entire armies with standardized weapons. Technological adaptation demonstrates the practical intelligence of warrior culture. Christian missionaries follow Portuguese traders to Japan. Francis Xavier arrives in 1549 carrying a message that challenges fundamental assumptions about Japanese spirituality and social organization. Christianity offers concepts of universal human equality that conflict with hierarchical warrior society. Some daimyo convert to Christianity for practical reasons. Christian territories receive preferential trading arrangements with Portuguese merchants. European military advisors help Christian lords adopt new tactical innovations. Religious conversion becomes another tool for gaining political advantage during the chaotic Sengoku period. The synthesis of foreign and native influences creates uniquely Japanese cultural innovations. European painting techniques combine with traditional Japanese aesthetic sensibilities. Chinese philosophical concepts merge with indigenous spiritual practices. The warrior class demonstrates its ability to absorb and transform external influences while maintaining essential cultural identity. The ashes of the Onin War settle over a transformed Japan. The year is 1467. Central authority has crumbled like ancient parchment. Provincial lords declare independence from shogunal control. The country fragments into dozens of autonomous domains. Each territory becomes a separate nation with its own army, laws, and ambitions. The Ashikaga shogunate survives in name but controls little beyond Kyoto's immediate surroundings. The bureaucracy at the capital maintains its ceremonies and paperwork, but the outer provinces ignore orders from the powerless government. Local warlords called daimyo rule their lands however they choose. They collect their own taxes. They wage their own wars. They create their own alliances. This is the birth of the Sengoku period, the age of warring states. Civil wars and social upheavals will continue almost without interruption for the next century and a half. Japan becomes a laboratory for military innovation, a proving ground for new technologies, a battlefield where only the strongest survive. The breakdown of central authority creates opportunities for ambitious men regardless of their birth. Traditional hierarchies collapse when force becomes the only law. Clever peasants can rise to command armies. Skilled administrators can seize territories from incompetent lords. The rigid social order gives way to survival of the fittest. Professional armies replace the part-time warrior bands of earlier periods. Daimyo need soldiers who can fight full-time rather than farmers who practice warfare between planting seasons. They recruit ashigaru, foot soldiers armed with spears and later firearms. These common soldiers prove more reliable than temperamental samurai. The ashigaru units change everything about Japanese warfare. They fight in disciplined formations rather than individual duels. They follow orders without questioning honor codes. They use mass tactics that overwhelm traditional samurai methods. Military effectiveness matters more than noble bloodlines in this new age of constant conflict. Castle towns called Jokomachi develop around the fortified residences of major daimyo. These settlements combine military necessity with economic opportunity. Craftsmen produce weapons and armor for the lord's armies. Merchants supply food and materials for military campaigns. Farmers provide the agricultural foundation that supports everything else. The castle towns represent a revolution in Japanese social organization. Previously, warriors lived scattered across rural estates. Now they concentrate in fortified urban centers. This creates opportunities for specialized military training, for coordinated tactical development, for the emergence of truly professional warrior cultures. Military innovations spread rapidly through the competitive environment of the Sengoku period. Daimyo who fail to adopt new weapons and tactics face elimination by more progressive neighbors. Technological advancement becomes essential for survival. Conservative traditions yield to practical effectiveness. Firearms arrive from Portuguese traders in 1543 and transform Japanese warfare within decades. Japanese craftsmen master European manufacturing techniques quickly. They improve upon foreign designs. They develop mass production methods that supply entire armies with standardized weapons. The age of the sword begins its gradual transition to the age of the gun. Castle architecture evolves to meet the challenges of gunpowder weapons. Traditional wooden palisades cannot stop cannonballs. Engineers design massive stone foundations. They create complex defensive systems with multiple barriers. They position artillery emplacements to command surrounding terrain. Japanese castles become marvels of military engineering. The economic demands of constant warfare drive innovations in taxation and administration. Daimyo need reliable income streams to support professional armies. They survey their territories to assess agricultural productivity accurately. They standardize weights and measures to facilitate trade. They develop sophisticated bureaucracies to manage complex military logistics. Regional lords compete not only in warfare but also in cultural achievement. They patronize artists and intellectuals to demonstrate their sophistication. They build magnificent palaces to display their wealth. They sponsor religious institutions to gain spiritual legitimacy. Military power alone is insufficient for lasting success. Some territories specialize in particular military technologies. The Nagoro Temple complex becomes famous for firearms production. The Saiga region develops expertise in naval warfare. The Koga and Iga provinces train the most skilled ninja infiltrators. Specialization creates interdependence even among hostile domains. The constant warfare creates a mobile population of professional soldiers. Masterless samurai called ronin sell their services to the highest bidders. Displaced farmers join Ashigaru units for steady wages. Ambitious young men travel between domains seeking opportunities for advancement. Social mobility increases dramatically during this period of chaos. Religious institutions adapt to the new military realities. Buddhist temples organize warrior monk armies to protect their extensive properties. Some temples become major military powers controlling significant territories. Others ally themselves with secular daimyo for mutual protection. Religion and warfare become inseparably intertwined. The emperor remains in Kyoto as a powerless figurehead during most of this period. Various daimyo claim to serve imperial interests while ignoring imperial commands. The emperor survives on donations from competing warlords who want the legitimacy that imperial recognition provides. Sacred authority exists separately from practical power. A young man stands in the morning mist overlooking the Owari plain. His retainers whisper that he is a fool. They call him the great fool of Owari behind his back. Oda Nobunaga cares nothing for their opinions. He sees possibilities they cannot imagine. He will either conquer Japan or die trying. Nobunaga inherits a minor domain from his father in 1551. Owari province occupies strategic territory, but lacks the resources of greater powers. Traditional wisdom suggests accepting subordinate status under more powerful neighbors. But Nobunaga rejects traditional wisdom along with everything else about conventional warrior culture. His first innovation involves military organization. While other daimyo depend on samurai retainers with divided loyalties, Nobunaga creates armies of Ashigaru foot soldiers who serve only him. These common fighters feel no obligation to honor codes that prioritize individual glory over unit effectiveness. They follow orders that aristocratic warriors might refuse. The Battle of Okahazama in 1560 demonstrates Nobunaga's revolutionary approach to warfare. The powerful Imagawa clan marches against Owari with overwhelming numerical superiority. Their commanders expect easy victory. But Nobunaga abandons defensive positions for a surprise attack during a thunderstorm. His small force destroys an army 10 times larger. The victory at Okahazama establishes Nobunaga's reputation for military genius. But more importantly, it proves that innovative tactics can overcome traditional advantages. Superior numbers and noble bloodlines mean nothing if the enemy possesses better strategy and more flexible organization. This lesson will guide all of Nobunaga's subsequent campaigns. Nobunaga's treatment of Buddhism shocks contemporary Japan. While other daimyo seek accommodation with religious institutions, he declares war on temples that oppose his authority. He views warrior monks as competitors for military and political power. Their claims to spiritual authority mean nothing to his secular ambitions. The destruction of Mount Hiei in 1571 demonstrates Nobunaga's ruthless approach to religious opposition. This sacred mountain has housed Buddhist monasteries for 8 centuries. Its temples contain irreplaceable artistic treasures. Its monks include some of Japan's most learned scholars. Nobunaga burns everything to the ground. The burning of Mount Hiei sends a clear message throughout Japan. No institution is sacred if it challenges Nobunaga's authority. No tradition is immune from destruction if it impedes his progress. Religious power must submit to military force or face complete annihilation. This policy creates enemies but also eliminates resistance. Firearms become central to Nobunaga's military strategy. While traditional samurai view guns as unworthy weapons for honorable warriors, he embraces their practical effectiveness. His Ashigaru units train constantly with matchlock muskets. They develop disciplined volleys that devastate enemy formations before sword combat begins. The Battle of Nagakuti showcases Nobunaga's innovative use of firearms. His forces create wooden barriers to protect musketeers while they reload. They coordinate volleys to maintain continuous fire. They use terrain advantages to maximize the effectiveness of their shooting positions. European military techniques blend with Japanese tactical innovations. Nobunaga's alliance with European missionaries serves both practical and strategic purposes. Portuguese traders provide advanced military technology in exchange for religious toleration. Christian converts among his retainers demonstrate loyalty to their lord rather than traditional religious authorities. Foreign connections enhance his prestige while weakening domestic opponents. The siege of Ishiyama Honganji represents Nobunaga's most challenging military campaign. This fortified temple complex controls access to Osaka Bay. Its warrior monks possess sophisticated weapons and strong defensive positions. Their religious authority allows them to recruit allies throughout western Japan. The siege continues for 11 years. Naval warfare becomes crucial during the Ishiyama Honganji campaign. Temple forces receive supplies and reinforcements by sea. Nobunaga must control maritime approaches to achieve victory. He builds innovative warships equipped with firearms. His naval commanders adapt land-based tactics to shipboard combat. The fall of Ishiyama Honganji in 1580 marks the end of armed religious resistance to Nobunaga's authority. No Buddhist institution can challenge his secular government afterward. Temple lands provide resources for rewarding loyal retainers. The destruction of religious military power creates opportunities for complete national unification. Nobunaga's administrative innovations match his military achievements. He standardizes weights and measures throughout his territories. He eliminates internal trade barriers. He creates efficient taxation systems based on accurate land surveys. His domains become models of effective governance that other daimyo attempt to copy. The policy of Rakuchi Rakuza, free markets and free guilds, revolutionizes commerce in Nobunaga's territories. Traditional monopolies disappear, trade restrictions vanish, economic activity increases dramatically when merchants can operate without excessive regulation. Prosperity follows military conquest. Castle construction reaches new heights of sophistication under Nobunaga's patronage. Azuchi Castle represents the ultimate fusion of defensive capability and aesthetic achievement. Its 7-story keep dominates the landscape while housing magnificent artistic treasures. The castle becomes a symbol of Nobunaga's power and cultural aspirations. Nobunaga's personal style challenges every convention of traditional samurai behavior. He wears foreign clothing and displays foreign weapons. He promotes men based on ability rather than birth. He shows no respect for religious ceremonies or court traditions. His revolutionary character matches his revolutionary military methods. The Honnoji incident of 1582 ends Nobunaga's career at the moment of his greatest triumph. Akechi Mitsuhide, one of his trusted generals, launches a surprise attack while Nobunaga visits a Kyoto temple. Surrounded by enemies with no hope of escape, the great destroyer chooses death by his own sword rather than capture by his former retainer. News of Nobunaga's death spreads across Japan like wildfire. His empire seems poised to collapse into warring fragments. But one man moves faster than anyone expects. Toyotomi Hideyoshi abandons his campaign against the Mori clan. He races back toward Kyoto with his army. The peasant who became a general will claim his master's inheritance. Hideyoshi's origins distinguish him from every previous Japanese ruler. He was born a farmer's son in a village so small it lacked a name. His original name was Hiyoshi Maru, Little Monkey. Physical appearance and humble birth should have condemned him to lifelong obscurity. But Nobunaga recognized talent regardless of social origins. The man they called Monkey possessed qualities that noble birth could not provide. He understood logistics better than any contemporary general. He could motivate common soldiers through personal charisma. He grasped political subtleties that escaped more educated rivals. His practical intelligence compensated for every disadvantage of low birth. Hideyoshi's response to the Honnoji incident demonstrates his strategic brilliance. While other commanders debate their options, he acts decisively. He makes peace with his current enemies to concentrate against Akechi Mitsuhide. He secures his supply lines for rapid movement. He reaches the battlefield before his rivals even begin marching. The Battle of Yamazaki settles the succession dispute within days of Nobunaga's death. Akechi Mitsuhide finds himself isolated without allies. His forces face a coalition assembled by Hideyoshi's diplomatic skills. The battle becomes a rout as Mitsuhide's troops desert rather than die for their treacherous commander. Victory at Yamazaki establishes Hideyoshi as Nobunaga's legitimate successor. But formal recognition requires careful political maneuvering. He cannot simply declare himself the new leader. He must build consensus among Nobunaga's former retainers. He must demonstrate continuity with his predecessor's policies while establishing his own authority. The Kyosu Conference of 1582 showcases Hideyoshi's political genius. He arranges the meeting to discuss Nobunaga's succession among the major generals. Through careful preparation and brilliant negotiation, he secures appointment as regent for Nobunaga's infant grandson. This position provides legitimate authority while maintaining useful flexibility. Hideyoshi's military campaigns demonstrate systematic planning rather than impulsive aggression. He chooses targets based on strategic importance rather than personal grudges. He uses diplomacy to isolate enemies before attacking them. He offers generous terms to opponents who submit voluntarily. These methods prove more effective than Nobunaga's purely military approach. The Siege of Odawara in 1590 represents the masterpiece of Hideyoshi's strategic thinking. The Hojo clan controls the Kanto region from their massive castle complex. Rather than assault the fortifications directly, Hideyoshi surrounds them with an army of 200,000 men. He builds a complete city outside the castle walls. The siege becomes a festival of military engineering and cultural display. Hideyoshi constructs comfortable quarters for his commanders. He arranges entertainment, including poetry contests and tea ceremonies. He demonstrates that his army can maintain the siege indefinitely while the defenders face starvation. Psychological pressure achieves what direct assault could not. The fall of Odawara completes the unification of Japan under Hideyoshi's authority. No independent daimyo remains to challenge his supremacy. The Warring States period officially ends as centralized government replaces regional autonomy. Japan becomes a unified nation for the first time in centuries. The Great Sword Hunt of 1588 represents Hideyoshi's most revolutionary social policy. He orders the confiscation of all weapons from farmers and religious institutions. Only samurai may carry swords. This policy prevents peasant rebellions while clearly defining class boundaries. Social order becomes institutionalized through weapon control. Class separation extends beyond weapon ownership to occupational restrictions. Farmers must remain farmers. Merchants cannot become samurai. Artisans stay within their inherited trades. Social mobility, which characterized the chaotic Sengoku period, virtually disappears under Hideyoshi's systematic regulations. The invasion of Korea in 1592 demonstrates both Hideyoshi's ambitions and his limitations. He dreams of conquering China through Korean territory. His armies achieve initial success through superior firearms and tactics. But Korean naval forces led by Admiral Yi Sun-sin destroy Japanese supply lines. Chinese reinforcements outnumber the invaders. Japanese samurai face unfamiliar challenges in Korean warfare. The terrain differs from their island homeland. Local populations resist foreign occupation. Chinese military techniques prove surprisingly effective against Japanese innovations. The invasion becomes a costly stalemate that drains resources without achieving strategic objectives. The Korean campaigns transform Japanese military culture through exposure to foreign warfare. Samurai learn to fight in different climates and conditions. They adapt their tactics to continental-scale battles. They develop new appreciation for naval power and international logistics. These experiences will influence Japanese military thinking for centuries. Castle building reaches unprecedented heights under Hideyoshi's patronage. Osaka Castle represents the ultimate achievement of Japanese military architecture. Its massive stone foundations support elegant wooden superstructures. Its defensive systems incorporate lessons learned from European fortress design. The castle becomes both practical fortress and magnificent palace. Hideyoshi's personal transformation mirrors Japan's social evolution during his reign. The peasant boy becomes a cultured aristocrat who patronizes artists and scholars. He sponsors elaborate tea ceremonies and poetry competitions. He collects rare artworks and builds magnificent gardens. Military achievement enables cultural refinement. The Taiko title that Hideyoshi receives reflects his unique position in Japanese history. Originally meaning Great Drum, it becomes his personal designation after he retires from active government. He rules as elder statesman while his nephew serves as nominal heir. This arrangement preserves his authority while providing formal succession. Hideyoshi's death in 1598 creates the succession crisis that will destroy his dynasty. His son Hideyori is only 5 years old. The Regency Council includes ambitious generals who covet supreme power for themselves. The unified Japan that Hideyoshi created begins fragmenting before his funeral ceremonies conclude. Tokugawa Ieyasu sits quietly in his modest residence as news arrives of Hideyoshi's death. Other generals rush to claim positions in the new government. They form factions and make alliances. They prepare for the inevitable conflict over succession. Ieyasu watches and waits. Patience has been his greatest weapon throughout a long career. The man who will found Japan's longest-lasting dynasty began as a hostage child. The Matsudaira clan, his family, survived between powerful neighbors through careful diplomacy and strategic marriages. Young Ieyasu learned early that survival required intelligence rather than bravery, that timing mattered more than strength. Ieyasu's service under both Nobunaga and Hideyoshi taught valuable lessons about leadership and power. He observed their successes and their failures. He studied their methods of controlling subordinates. He learned when to advance and when to retreat. Most importantly, he understood the importance of reliable allies. The Kanto region becomes Ieyasu's power base after Hideyoshi's death. This vast territory provides agricultural wealth and strategic depth. Its distance from Kyoto allows independent action without appearing disloyal. From Edo, his new capital, Ieyasu can monitor developments throughout Japan while building his strength. The Regency Council established by Hideyoshi begins fracturing immediately after his death. Ishida Mitsunari leads the civilian administrators who want to preserve Toyotomi authority. Military commanders prefer independent action to collective decision-making. Personal rivalries complicate every policy discussion. Ieyasu cultivates relationships with key military commanders while avoiding open challenges to Toyotomi legitimacy. He offers marriage alliances to potential supporters. He provides financial assistance to allies facing economic difficulties. He demonstrates reliability through consistent behavior over time. The crisis escalates when Ishida Mitsunari accuses Ieyasu of violating Hideyoshi's testament. The charges include unauthorized marriage alliances and territorial negotiations. These accusations force Ieyasu to choose between submission and open rebellion. His response will determine Japan's future. The Battle of Sekigahara on October 15, 1600, becomes the most decisive engagement in Japanese history. Two massive armies converge in the mountain valley that controls access to central Japan. Eastern forces loyal to Ieyasu face Western armies supporting the Toyotomi cause. The outcome will determine supreme authority for centuries. The battle begins in morning fog that obscures troop movements. Initial engagements favor neither side. But Ieyasu's careful diplomatic preparation proves decisive. Key Western commanders change sides during the fighting. The Kobayakawa clan refuses to engage. The Mori forces withdraw without participating. Victory at Sekigahara establishes Ieyasu as the undisputed master of Japan. His enemies face execution or exile. Their territories provide rewards for loyal supporters. The Toyotomi family retains Osaka Castle and surrounding lands but loses all real power. The new order begins immediately. Ieyasu's appointment as shogun in 1603 formalizes his political victory. The emperor grants this title reluctantly, but cannot resist Ieyasu's military dominance. The ceremony in Kyoto demonstrates continuity with past traditions, while establishing new leadership. Japan gains its third and final shogunal dynasty. The early Tokugawa policies focus on preventing future rebellions rather than governing efficiently. Ieyasu redistributes territories to separate potential enemies. He requires hostages from daimyo families. He establishes the Sankin Kotai system, forcing periodic residence in Edo. These measures ensure loyalty through mutual vulnerability. The siege of Osaka Castle in 1614 to 1615 eliminates the last threat to Tokugawa supremacy. Young Toyotomi Hideyori has grown to manhood surrounded by ronin, who remember his family's former glory. His marriage to Ieyasu's granddaughter fails to prevent the inevitable confrontation between old and new authority. The winter siege of 1614 demonstrates Tokugawa military superiority through systematic pressure rather than dramatic assault. Artillery bombardment damages the massive fortifications. Economic blockade prevents resupply. Diplomatic isolation eliminates potential allies. Osaka Castle becomes a magnificent prison for its defenders. Negotiations during the winter siege reveal Ieyasu's political sophistication. He offers generous terms that divide castle defenders. Some accept exile in exchange for their lives. Others insist on fighting to the death. These divisions weaken resistance more effectively than military pressure alone. The summer campaign of 1615 completes the destruction of Toyotomi power. Direct assault succeeds where siege warfare merely contained the problem. Hideyori dies by suicide as Tokugawa forces storm his final stronghold. The Sengoku period officially ends with the fall of Osaka Castle. Ieyasu's victory establishes the foundation for Japan's longest period of peace. The Tokugawa shogunate will govern Japan for over 2.5 centuries without major internal warfare. The age of constant conflict yields to an era of stability and cultural development. The patient general's triumph creates lasting transformation. The institutional changes implemented by Ieyasu define Japanese society for the remainder of the feudal period. The four-class system restricts social mobility. The isolation policy limits foreign contact. The bureaucratic government replaces military leadership. These innovations end the chaos of the Warring States era forever. The great castles built during the Sengoku period become symbols of regional administration rather than independent military power. Their stone foundations and elegant superstructures remind everyone of the age when warfare determined political authority. But their guns fall silent under Tokugawa rule. As morning mist rises from the valleys surrounding Edo, Ieyasu contemplates the Japan he has created through decades of patient struggle. The samurai warriors who dominated the age of constant warfare must now adapt to an era of peace. Their swords will rust in their scabbards as bureaucratic administration replaces military command. The morning sun rises over Edo Castle as Tokugawa Ieyasu contemplates the Japan he has won through decades of patient struggle. The great fortress sits on elevated ground overlooking a vast plain that stretches to the sea. This will become the center of a new world, a Japan transformed from constant warfare to enduring peace. But peace requires different skills than war. The Sankin Kotai system becomes the cornerstone of Tokugawa control over the daimyo class. Every regional lord must maintain a residence in Edo and spend alternating years in the shogun's capital. Their families remain permanently in the capital as elegant hostages. This arrangement transforms potential rebels into reluctant courtiers. The The great processions of daimyo travelling to and from Edo create moving displays of wealth and power. Hundreds of retainers accompany each lord. Elaborate palanquins carry noble families. Pack horses transport magnificent gifts for the shogun. These processions drain daimyo treasuries while demonstrating their submission to central authority. Edo grows rapidly as daimyo residences multiply throughout the expanding city. Each lord requires a compound suitable for his status. Gardens must reflect seasonal beauty. Buildings must accommodate hundreds of retainers. The construction boom transforms a fishing village into Japan's largest urban centre within decades. The warrior class faces its greatest challenge since the Genpei War. How do professional fighters adapt to an era of peace? Their military skills become ornamental rather than practical. Their swords remain sheathed except for ceremonial occasions. They must discover new purposes for their existence or face gradual irrelevance. Neo-Confucian ideology provides philosophical justification for warrior rule during peacetime. The samurai become moral exemplars rather than military leaders. They demonstrate proper behavior for lower social classes. They cultivate learning and ethical refinement. Intellectual accomplishment replaces battlefield prowess as the measure of warrior excellence. Education becomes the primary occupation of the samurai class during the early Edo period. They study Chinese classics in domain schools established throughout the country. They practice calligraphy and poetry composition. They learn mathematics and astronomy. The warrior scholar emerges as the new ideal of samurai achievement. The four-class system institutionalizes social hierarchy with unprecedented precision. Samurai occupy the highest rank as the ruling warrior class. Farmers receive second place as producers of essential food. Artisans rank third as creators of useful goods. Merchants occupy the lowest position despite their growing wealth because they produce nothing tangible. Social mobility virtually disappears under the rigid class system. Farmers' children must remain farmers. Merchant families cannot purchase samurai status. Professional boundaries become hereditary walls that separate different groups within society. The fluid social conditions of the Sengoku period end completely. The Sakoku isolation policy shapes Japan's relationship with the outside world for over 2 centuries. Foreign trade becomes restricted to designated ports under government control. Christian missionaries face expulsion or execution. Japanese citizens cannot travel abroad without official permission. The islands become a closed world unto themselves. Portuguese and Spanish missionaries created thousands of Christian converts during the late Sengoku period. Some daimyo adopted Christianity for political advantage. Christian communities developed their own cultural traditions. But the Tokugawa government views foreign religion as a threat to social stability and political control. The persecution of Christians begins gradually, but escalates into systematic oppression. Missionaries face deportation or martyrdom. Japanese converts must renounce their faith or suffer torture and death. Christian artifacts disappear into hiding places or face destruction. The foreign religion goes underground to survive. Hidden Christian communities develop elaborate methods for preserving their faith while avoiding detection. They disguise Christian prayers as Buddhist chants. They worship using images that appear to depict Buddhist deities, but secretly represent Christian figures. They pass religious knowledge through oral traditions rather than written texts. The transformation from warriors to administrators proceeds slowly as peace extends from years into decades. Samurai learn to use brushes more than swords. They master bureaucratic procedures rather than battle tactics. They navigate court politics instead of military campaigns. Their world becomes smaller but more complex. Castle towns throughout Japan reflect the new realities of peaceful administration. The massive fortifications built during the Sengoku period remain as symbols of daimyo authority. But their defensive capabilities become decorative rather than functional. No enemies threaten the gates, no armies mass in the surrounding fields. Economic development accelerates under the stable conditions created by Tokugawa rule. Merchants establish reliable trade routes between regions. Craftsmen perfect their techniques without fear of warfare disrupting their work. Farmers improve agricultural methods that increase crop yields. Prosperity follows peace throughout the archipelago. The Machibugyo system creates professional urban administration in major cities. These magistrates handle civil and criminal cases involving non-samurai populations. They regulate commercial activities and maintain public order. They represent shogunal authority in daily interactions with ordinary citizens. Cultural production flourishes as resources previously devoted to warfare become available for artistic pursuits. Publishers produce books for growing literate audiences. Theatre companies perform for urban populations. Artists create works celebrating peaceful themes rather than military glory. The aesthetic sensibilities nurtured during the Muromachi period find new expression. The third Tokugawa shogun, Iemitsu, dies in 1651, marking the end of the founding generation that remembered the age of wars. His successors inherit a Japan so thoroughly pacified that warfare exists only in historical memory. The samurai class completes its transformation from fighting men to civil servants who carry swords as symbols rather than weapons. Edo emerges as one of the world's largest cities during this period of urban growth. Its population exceeds 1 million inhabitants by 1700. Samurai residences occupy vast areas in the castle's vicinity. Merchant districts spread outward from commercial centres. Artisan neighbourhoods specialise in particular crafts and trades. The floating world of urban pleasure emerges in districts like Yoshiwara, where licensed courtesans entertain wealthy clients. These quarters exist outside normal social regulations. Merchants can purchase experiences denied to them in respectable society. Samurai can escape temporarily from the burdens of their official responsibilities. Kabuki theatre develops as the characteristic art form of urban merchant culture. Unlike aristocratic no-drama, Kabuki performances appeal to popular tastes. They feature spectacular costumes and dramatic storylines. They celebrate themes of love, revenge, and social conflict that resonate with merchant and artisan audiences. Ukiyo-e woodblock prints capture scenes from the floating world for mass consumption. These affordable artworks depict actors, courtesans, and urban landscapes. They celebrate the transient pleasures that city life offers. The prints become some of Japan's most recognizable artistic exports in later centuries. The samurai face growing economic difficulties as peace extends through multiple generations. Their stipends remain fixed while living costs increase. Urban life proves more expensive than rural estate management. Many warrior families sink into genteel poverty while maintaining appearances of prosperity. The Genroku cultural era, 1688-1704, represents the height of merchant artistic patronage. Wealthy townspeople commission works that rival aristocratic collections. They sponsor theatre performances and literary publications. They create new aesthetic standards that influence all levels of society. Ihara Saikaku emerges as the master chronicler of urban merchant life. His novels explore themes of money, love, and social ambition that define city existence. Characters pursue wealth and pleasure with single-minded determination. Traditional moral categories give way to pragmatic considerations about success and failure. Matsuo Basho elevates haiku poetry to its greatest artistic heights during this period. His verses capture moments of natural beauty and spiritual insight. The extreme brevity of the form requires precision that appeals to both merchant practicality and samurai aesthetic sensibilities. Haiku becomes truly democratic poetry. The puppet theatre called bunraku develops sophisticated techniques for dramatic presentation. Master puppeteers manipulate life-sized figures with extraordinary skill. The Jururi musical narratives that accompany performances combine classical literature with popular entertainment. This art form influences all subsequent Japanese theatre. The 47 Ronin incident of 1703 crystallizes idealized concepts of samurai loyalty for the peaceful Edo period. These masterless warriors avenge their lord's death through careful planning and ultimate sacrifice. Their story becomes the subject of countless artistic works that celebrate traditional warrior values in a non-military context. The Ronin story resonates powerfully because it addresses fundamental questions about samurai purpose during peacetime. What obligations survive when feudal bonds dissolve? How should warriors respond to injustice when legal remedies fail? The incident provides mythic answers that comfort a warrior class struggling with identity questions. Educational developments during this period create the most literate society in the contemporary world. Domain schools teach samurai children classical subjects. Temple schools provide basic education for merchant and farmer children. Private academies offer advanced instruction in specialized subjects. Learning becomes accessible across social boundaries. The rise of popular literature reflects widespread literacy among urban populations. Publishers produce novels, poetry collections, and practical guides for mass audiences. Lending libraries make books available to readers who cannot afford to purchase them. Reading becomes a common leisure activity throughout Japanese society. Confucian scholarship reaches its highest development in Japan during the Middle Edo period. Scholars like Ogyusurai and Ito Jinsai create philosophical systems that adapt Chinese learning to Japanese conditions. They influence governmental policy and educational practices throughout the country. Economic growth creates new social tensions as merchant wealth challenges samurai privilege. Successful businessmen accumulate fortunes that exceed daimyo incomes, but their low social status prevents them from translating economic power into political influence. These contradictions strain the rigid class system. The emergence of a national market economy links distant regions through commercial networks. Rice exchanges in Osaka and Edo establish standard prices throughout the country. Regional specializations develop as areas focus on particular products. Economic integration proceeds despite political fragmentation. Urban festivals provide outlets for social energy that might otherwise challenge political authority. Seasonal celebrations involve entire neighborhoods in elaborate processions. Temporary reversals of social hierarchy allow commoners to mock their superiors safely. These events serve as pressure valves for accumulated tensions. The 8th Tokugawa shogun, Yoshimune, confronts growing financial crises that threaten the stability of the entire system. Samurai stipends consume increasing portions of domain budgets. Urban expenses drain resources faster than agricultural taxes can replenish them. The peaceful prosperity of the early Edo period creates unforeseen economic burdens. Natural disasters compound the financial difficulties facing both government and people. The Great Tenmei famine of the 1780s kills hundreds of thousands. Volcanic eruptions destroy crops across wide areas. Earthquakes damage cities and disrupt commerce. These catastrophes strain resources already stretched by systemic problems. Peasant uprisings increase in frequency and scale as rural conditions deteriorate. Farmers face higher taxes while dealing with harvest failures. They organize protests that sometimes involve thousands of participants. Village leaders petition officials for relief from impossible fiscal demands. Rural stability begins to crack under economic pressure. The merchant class continues accumulating wealth, while officially remaining the lowest social rank. Successful businessmen purchase samurai privileges through adoption or marriage. They loan money to impoverished daimyo and samurai families. Economic reality conflicts increasingly with legal theory about social hierarchy. Rangaku, Dutch learning, introduces European scientific knowledge through the limited contact permitted at Nagasaki. Japanese scholars study Western medicine, astronomy, and military technology. They translate European texts and conduct scientific experiments. This foreign knowledge challenges traditional Chinese learning. The Mito school develops nationalist ideology that emphasizes Japan's unique imperial tradition. Scholars like Tokugawa Mitsukuni compile historical works that celebrate the emperor's divine ancestry. They argue that the shogun should serve imperial interests rather than exercising independent authority. These ideas will eventually undermine Tokugawa legitimacy. Foreign ships appear with increasing frequency in Japanese waters during the late Edo period. Russian expeditions explore northern territories. British vessels seek trading opportunities. American whalers request supply privileges. The isolation policy becomes harder to maintain as foreign pressure increases. The Morrison Incident of 1837 demonstrates the shogunate's continuing commitment to isolation despite changing circumstances. American merchants attempt to return Japanese castaways while seeking trade relations. Coastal batteries fire on their ship without allowing communication. The incident reveals both foreign interest and Japanese resistance to contact. Internal debates about foreign policy intensify as external pressure mounts. Conservative officials advocate maintaining isolation regardless of consequences. Progressive thinkers argue for selective adoption of Western military technology. Moderate voices suggest limited trade under strict governmental control. No consensus emerges about appropriate responses. The samurai class fragments into competing intellectual factions during this period of uncertainty. Some warriors embrace traditional values and resist all foreign influences. Others study Western learning and advocate military modernization. Still, others develop romantic nationalism that idealizes Japan's unique characteristics. Economic theories developed during this period attempt to address growing commercial complexity. Scholars analyze monetary policy and trade regulations. They propose reforms for taxation and administration. But theoretical knowledge often conflicts with entrenched interest that resist systematic changes. The alternate attendance system becomes increasingly burdensome for daimyo facing financial difficulties. The costs of maintaining Edo residences and travelling expenses consume resources needed for domain administration. Some lords petitioned for reduced obligations, but the shogunate refuses to weaken its control mechanisms. Urban culture continues evolving as merchant influence grows stronger. New art forms emerge that celebrate commercial success and material prosperity. Traditional aesthetic categories adapt to accommodate changed social conditions. Cultural production reflects the complex tensions between official ideology and social reality. Educational expansion creates a more informed population that questions traditional authority structures. Domain schools produce graduates who study Western learning and comparative politics. Private academies teach practical skills that challenge established professional monopolies. Knowledge becomes a tool for social criticism. The rise of popular nationalism provides alternative loyalties that compete with Tokugawa authority. Emperor-centered ideology appeals to samurai who feel betrayed by peaceful stagnation. Regional pride motivates domains that resent central control. These emotional attachments will eventually mobilize opposition to the shogunate. Religious developments during this period reflect growing spiritual uncertainty. New Buddhist sects emerge that appeal to popular anxieties. Shinto revival emphasizes Japan's divine protection and unique destiny. Hidden Christian communities maintain their faith despite continued persecution. Religious diversity increases despite official orthodoxy. The morning of July 8, 1853, dawns clear and calm over Edo Bay. Fishermen notice strange dark shapes on the horizon. As the sun rises higher, 4 black ships become visible approaching the Japanese coast. These vessels differ from any ships previously seen in Japanese waters. They move without sails, powered by steam engines that belch smoke into the sky. Commodore Matthew Perry commands the American naval squadron that will force Japan's opening to the world. His ships carry advanced weapons and represent the industrial power of the United States. Perry brings a letter from President Fillmore demanding trade relations and fuel stations for American vessels. The age of isolation approaches its end. The arrival of Perry's black ships creates panic throughout the Tokugawa government. Officials debate how to respond to this unprecedented challenge. Traditional isolation policies prove inadequate when foreign powers possess overwhelming military superiority. The shogunate faces the first serious external threat since the Mongol invasions. Perry demonstrates American military technology through carefully orchestrated displays of power. His steamships maneuver independently of wind conditions. His cannons fire explosive shells that dwarf Japanese artillery. These demonstrations convinced Japanese officials that resistance would be futile without massive military modernization. The shogunate makes the revolutionary decision to consult daimyo and court nobles about foreign policy. This breaks centuries of precedent about independent shogunal decision-making. The request for advice reveals governmental uncertainty, while creating opportunities for previously excluded voices to influence national policy. Responses to the foreign crisis reveal deep divisions within Japanese society. Conservative officials advocate continued resistance regardless of military disadvantages. Progressive leaders argue for immediate adoption of Western technology and limited trade relations. Moderate voices seek compromise solutions that preserve essential Japanese characteristics while accepting necessary changes. The Sono-Joi movement emerges during this crisis as an alternative to Tokugawa leadership. Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians becomes the rallying cry for those who reject foreign contact while demanding political change. This movement attracts samurai who feel betrayed by shogunal weakness in dealing with foreign pressure. Young samurai from southwestern domains take leadership roles in organizing resistance to both foreign influence and Tokugawa authority. Men like Sakamoto Ryoma from Tosa and Takasugi Shinsaku from Choshu develop revolutionary programs that combine nationalism with political reform. They represent a new generation willing to destroy existing systems. The Treaty of Kanagawa, signed in 1854, officially ends Japan's isolation policy. American ships receive fuel and supply privileges at designated ports. A limited trade relationship begins under strict governmental supervision. But this compromise satisfies neither foreign demands for expanded commerce nor Japanese desires to maintain autonomy. Additional treaties with European powers expand foreign privileges while demonstrating Japanese diplomatic inexperience. The Harris Treaty of 1858 grants extraterritorial rights to American citizens. Similar agreements with Britain, France, and Russia create a complex web of international obligations that limit Japanese sovereignty. The Ansi Purge of 1858-1859 represents the shogunate's attempt to suppress opposition through authoritarian measures. Government officials arrest and execute critics of foreign policy. They prohibit political discussions and dissolve unauthorized organizations, but repression only drives opposition underground while increasing resentment against Tokugawa rule. Regional domains begin independent military modernization programs despite shogunal prohibitions. Satsuma and Choshu domains purchase Western weapons and hire foreign military advisors. They experiment with new training methods and tactical innovations. These activities create the military capabilities that will eventually overthrow the shogunate. The imperial court in Kyoto emerges as an alternative source of political legitimacy during the foreign crisis. Emperor Komei opposes foreign treaties and criticizes shogunal weakness. Court nobles who have been politically irrelevant for centuries begin asserting ancient prerogatives. Imperial ideology provides justification for revolutionary changes. Anti-foreign violence increases throughout Japan as the crisis deepens. Samurai assassins target foreign diplomats and Japanese officials who support foreign relations. The Richardson Incident of 1862 leads to British retaliation against Satsuma Domain. These conflicts demonstrate that traditional methods cannot solve modern international problems. The Roshi movement mobilizes masterless samurai for political action during the 1860s. These unemployed warriors have no stake in existing arrangements and eagerly support radical changes. They form assassination groups and political societies that challenge established authority. Their desperation makes them dangerous allies for revolutionary leaders. Military conflicts between domains and foreign powers reveal Japanese military weaknesses while providing valuable learning experiences. The British bombardment of Kagoshima in 1863 demonstrates Western naval superiority, but it also teaches Japanese leaders about modern warfare techniques and the importance of industrial capacity for military effectiveness. The shogunate's final attempt at reform comes too late to save the system. Efforts to modernize the military and governmental structure encounter resistance from entrenched interests. Foreign pressure continues mounting while internal opposition grows stronger. The last Tokugawa shogun faces impossible choices between competing demands. The Meiji Restoration begins in 1868 when young samurai seize control of the imperial court and declare the end of shogunal authority. This revolution promises to restore direct imperial rule while adopting necessary Western innovations. The leaders combine traditional Japanese nationalism with practical acceptance of international realities. Emperor Meiji issues the Charter Oath that commits Japan to fundamental governmental and social changes. The country will adopt the best features of world civilization while preserving its unique characteristics. This careful balance between foreign learning and native tradition will guide Japan through the transition from feudalism to modern nationhood. As morning mist rises from the moats surrounding Edo Castle, the last Tokugawa shogun prepares to surrender his authority to imperial representatives. The age of warrior government that began with Minamoto Yoritomo nearly 7 centuries earlier approaches its peaceful conclusion. The samurai have governed Japan through its longest era of stability and cultural achievement. Now they must decide how to serve their country in the modern world that beckons beyond Japan's shores. The young Emperor Meiji sits in his palace as dawn breaks over a Japan forever changed. He is only 16 years old, but the men who speak for him carry the weight of centuries on their shoulders. They have destroyed the Tokugawa shogunate. They have restored imperial rule. Now they must build a modern nation from the ashes of feudalism. The Charter Oath of April 1868 becomes the foundation stone of the new Japan. 5 simple articles that will reshape an entire civilization. Deliberative assemblies shall be widely established and all matters decided by public discussion, the Emperor declares. Knowledge shall be sought throughout the world. These words mark the end of isolation, the beginning of transformation. The oath promises something revolutionary for Japan. All classes will be allowed to pursue their individual callings. The old restrictions that bound farmers to farms and merchants to shops will disappear. Social mobility becomes possible for the first time in centuries. But this freedom comes with a price. The samurai class that has ruled Japan for 700 years must surrender its privileges. The abolition of the Han domain system in 1871 strikes at the heart of feudal Japan. For over 1,000 years, powerful families controlled regional territories as their private possessions. Now the Meiji government declares these domains extinct. Prefectures under central government control replace the independent fiefdoms. Japan becomes a unified nation rather than a collection of autonomous territories. The daimyo lords who once commanded armies and governed provinces receive new titles but lose their real power. They must reside in Tokyo under government supervision. Their former territories become administrative units managed by appointed governors. The feudal lords transform from independent rulers into pensioned aristocrats. The samurai face an even more dramatic transformation. Their hereditary stipends disappear gradually, replaced entirely by government bonds in 1876. These payments represent only a fraction of their former incomes. Many warrior families sink into poverty overnight. The economic foundation of the samurai class crumbles like ancient castles struck by earthquakes. The prohibition on wearing swords delivers the final blow to samurai identity. For centuries, the right to carry 2 swords distinguished the warrior class from all other social groups. Now that privilege vanishes by imperial decree, the samurai must cut their top knots and adopt Western hairstyles. They exchange their traditional robes for business suits. The visible symbols of their warrior heritage disappear. The creation of a national conscript army in 1872 eliminates the military monopoly that justified samurai privileges. Universal military service means that farmers' sons can become soldiers. Common people receive training in modern weapons and tactics. The professional warrior becomes obsolete when every citizen can be a soldier. The new army adopts Western uniforms, weapons, and drill procedures. Japanese soldiers march in European formations. They carry rifles instead of swords. They follow officers promoted for ability rather than birth. This military revolution demonstrates that modern warfare requires technology and organization rather than individual courage and sword skills. Western educational systems replace traditional Confucian schooling throughout Japan. The government establishes a Ministry of Education in 1871 to create national standards for learning. Elementary schools open in every village. Students study mathematics and science alongside classical literature. Western knowledge becomes as important as Chinese wisdom. The transformation of Japanese society proceeds with breathtaking speed. Feudal class restrictions disappear almost overnight. The rigid social hierarchy that separated samurai, farmers, artisans and merchants gives way to legal equality for all citizens. People can choose their occupations and travel freely throughout the country. Railway construction connects distant regions for the first time in Japanese history. Telegraph lines carry messages across the archipelago in hours rather than weeks. Steamships replace sailing vessels in coastal trade. The technological infrastructure of a modern nation emerges within a single generation. Foreign advisors arrive to teach Western techniques in every field from military science to industrial engineering. German officers train the new Japanese army. British experts design the Naval Academy. American educators establish teaching methods in Japanese schools. The isolation policy gives way to enthusiastic adoption of foreign knowledge. The legal system undergoes complete reconstruction based on European models. Traditional laws suited to feudal society cannot govern a modern nation. New criminal and civil codes replace centuries of precedent. Western concepts of individual rights and legal equality become fundamental principles of Japanese justice. Saigo Takamori stands on a hill overlooking Kagoshima as cherry blossoms drift across the harbour. He is the last great samurai, a man who helped destroy the Tokugawa shogunate, a hero of the Meiji Restoration. But now he watches his own government abandon everything he fought to preserve. The warrior spirit, the code of honor, the soul of Japan itself. Saigo embodies the contradictions that tear Japan apart during these years of transformation. He supported the restoration that brought the emperor back to power. He believed in strengthening Japan against foreign threats. But he cannot accept the destruction of samurai values in pursuit of Western modernization. The cost of progress seems too high to bear. The crisis begins with debates about Korea in 1873. Conservative samurai argue that Japan should punish Korean refusal to revise diplomatic treaties. Military action would restore purpose to unemployed warriors who feel useless in peacetime. But the government leaders returning from study missions in Europe reject foreign adventures. Japan must concentrate on internal development rather than external expansion. Saigo resigns from the government when his proposal for Korean invasion is rejected. He returns to Satsuma province, followed by hundreds of samurai who share his disappointment with government policies. These men establish private schools that teach traditional martial arts alongside modern military techniques. They preserve samurai culture while the central government tries to eliminate it. The Satsuma schools become centers of opposition to government modernization policies. Young samurai practice swordsmanship and study classical Chinese texts. They cultivate the warrior virtues of loyalty, courage, and self-sacrifice. They reject Western customs that they believe corrupt Japanese character. Their schools become fortresses of traditional values. Tensions escalate throughout the mid-1870s as government policies increasingly alienate the samurai class. The prohibition on wearing swords particularly enrages traditional warriors. They view this ban as an attack on their fundamental identity. Some choose death rather than surrender their ancestral weapons. Smaller samurai rebellions erupt across Japan as discontent spreads among the warrior class. The Saga Rebellion of 1874 and other uprisings demonstrate growing opposition to government policies. But these local protests lack the leadership and resources needed for sustained resistance. The government suppresses them with minimal difficulty. The Satsuma Rebellion of 1877 represents the final and greatest challenge to the Meiji government's authority. When police attempt to confiscate weapons from Satsuma schools, violence erupts. Saigo reluctantly agrees to lead his followers in armed resistance. The last samurai war begins with 30,000 traditional warriors facing the modern Japanese army. The rebel army marches northward toward Kyoto, following routes used by their ancestors for centuries. They carry swords and spears alongside captured modern rifles. They wear traditional armor mixed with Western military equipment. They represent the ghost of feudal Japan attempting one final challenge to the modern world. The siege of Kumamoto Castle tests both traditional and modern military methods. The rebels surround the fortress using classical siege techniques learned from Chinese military manuals. But the castle's defenders employ telegraph communications and rapid-fire weapons that render traditional tactics obsolete. The siege demonstrates that courage alone cannot overcome technological superiority. Government reinforcements arrive by railway and steamship, while the rebels depend on foot soldiers and horse transport. Modern logistics prove decisive as fresh troops and supplies reach the battlefield faster than the rebels can intercept them. The transportation revolution that transforms Japanese commerce also revolutionizes warfare. The Battle of Shiroyama on September 24, 1877, marks the end of the samurai era. Saigo and his remaining followers make their final stand on a hill overlooking Kagoshima. They face overwhelming odds with honor intact but hope lost. The modern army surrounds them with artillery and rifle fire that no amount of courage can overcome. Saigo dies by seppuku as enemy forces storm his position. His death symbolizes the passing of an entire way of life. The warrior class that has dominated Japan for 7 centuries disappears in a morning of gunfire and steel. The age of the sword yields to the age of the rifle. Feudalism ends in blood and cherry blossoms. The government's victory demonstrates that traditional military methods cannot survive against modern organization and technology. Individual heroism proves insufficient when facing disciplined formations equipped with advanced weapons. The surviving rebels face execution or exile but receive surprisingly lenient treatment from the victorious government. Many former samurai find employment in the new military or civil service. Their traditional skills of leadership and discipline remain valuable even if their methods become obsolete. The warrior class transforms rather than disappears completely. The morning after Shiroyama, Japan awakens to a world without samurai. But something extraordinary begins to happen in the decades that follow. The warrior spirit that seemed to die with Saigo Takamori starts to take new forms. The sword may have surrendered to the rifle, but the soul of the samurai finds ways to survive and spread throughout the modern world. Martial arts masters work frantically to preserve techniques that might otherwise vanish forever. They establish formal schools with systematic curricula. They write detailed manuals explaining movements that had been passed down through generations by personal instruction. They create ranking systems that standardize training across different regions and styles. Jigoro Kano founds judo in 1882 as a modernized version of traditional jiu-jitsu. He eliminates the most dangerous techniques while preserving the essential principles of leverage and timing. His system emphasizes mental discipline and moral development alongside physical training. Judo becomes a way of cultivating character rather than simply learning fighting techniques. Kendo emerges from traditional swordsmanship as a spiritual discipline that requires no actual weapons. Practitioners use bamboo swords and protective armor to engage in ritualized combat. The emphasis shifts from killing enemies to perfecting technique and developing self-control. The way of the sword becomes a path to inner enlightenment. The new imperial army adopts many samurai values and customs despite rejecting traditional military methods. Officers study Bushido principles as part of their professional education. Military academies teach concepts of honor, loyalty, and sacrifice that derive directly from warrior traditions. The modern soldier inherits the samurai's spiritual legacy even while using different tools. Bushido, the way of the warrior, becomes systematized as a coherent philosophy during the Meiji period. Scholars compile scattered teachings into comprehensive guides for moral behavior. They identify core principles like courage, compassion, courtesy, honor, honesty, loyalty, and self-control. These ideals transcend their military origins to become national virtues. Educational reforms incorporate samurai moral teachings throughout the school system. Students learn about legendary warriors and their heroic deeds. They study classical texts that emphasize duty, loyalty, and self-sacrifice. The warrior ethos becomes part of general education rather than specialized military training. Literature romanticizes the samurai past while Japan rushes toward a Western future. Authors write novels celebrating traditional values that seem endangered by modernization. They create idealized portraits of noble warriors who chose death before dishonor. These romantic visions help preserve cultural memory even as reality changes completely. The 47 Ronin story becomes the most popular tale in Japanese culture during this period. This account of loyal retainers who avenge their master's death represents everything admirable about samurai character. The story inspires countless artistic adaptations in theatre, literature, and visual arts. It provides a template for proper behaviour in a world that has lost traditional guideposts. Woodblock prints depicting famous samurai battles find eager audiences both in Japan and abroad. These artistic works celebrate warrior courage while making it accessible to ordinary people. The prints export idealized images of samurai culture to Western countries where they shape foreign understanding of Japanese character. Theatre companies perform traditional plays about samurai heroes for urban audiences who have never seen real warriors. These dramatic presentations keep warrior stories alive in popular memory. They allow modern Japanese to connect emotionally with their feudal heritage even as they embrace contemporary lifestyles. International interest in Japanese martial arts begins during the late 19th century. Foreign students travel to Japan to learn judo, kendo, and other traditional disciplines. They carry these practices back to their own countries, where martial arts schools proliferate. The samurai influence spreads globally even as it transforms at home. Business leaders adopt samurai principles for commercial applications. They emphasize loyalty between employers and employees. They stress the importance of long-term relationships over short-term profits. They cultivate reputations for reliability and honor in their dealings with customers and competitors. The concept of lifetime employment in Japanese corporations reflects samurai values of mutual obligation between lords and retainers. Workers pledge loyalty to their companies in exchange for job security and advancement opportunities. This employment system creates stable relationships that benefit both parties while preserving traditional social bonds. Military victories over China in 1894 and Russia in 1905 demonstrate that Japan has successfully modernized without losing its warrior spirit. Japanese soldiers fight with courage that amazes foreign observers. They combine modern weapons with traditional values of sacrifice and honor. The samurai legacy lives on in new forms. Foreign observers begin studying Japanese culture to understand the sources of national strength. They identify the warrior tradition as a key factor in Japan's successful modernization. Books about samurai philosophy and martial arts find eager readers throughout the Western world. Japanese cultural exports include both technology and traditional wisdom. The global influence of samurai ideals continues expanding throughout the early 20th century. Martial arts spread to every continent. Business schools teach Japanese management principles derived from warrior traditions. Military academies study samurai concepts of honor and duty. The influence that began in isolated island fortresses reaches around the world. As the 19th century ends, the transformation is complete but not final. The samurai are gone, but their spirit endures. Their swords are sheathed, but their principles guide new generations. They have taught the world that true strength comes not from weapons alone, but from the cultivation of character. Their greatest victory is not any battle they won, but the continuing influence of their ideals on human civilization itself. The cherry blossoms still fall each spring across Japan, but now they fall on railways and factories as well as ancient temples. They fall on businessmen hurrying to offices and students walking to schools. The beauty remains constant while everything else changes, just like the samurai spirit that adapts to each new age while preserving its essential nature. The warriors are gone. Their way endures forever. The new century dawns over a Japan transformed beyond recognition. Steam locomotives thunder across landscapes where samurai once rode their horses. Telegraph wires stretch between cities that were once isolated castle towns. But in the schools and military academies of this modern nation, something ancient stirs. The spirit of the samurai thought dead at Shirayama begins its resurrection. The government that once sought to eliminate samurai privileges now discovers the power of samurai ideals. Bushido becomes more than historical memory. It transforms into national ideology. The Ministry of Education commissioned scholars to compile the scattered teachings of the warrior way into systematic doctrine. What emerges is not authentic samurai philosophy, but something new, a manufactured tradition designed to serve modern purposes. State Shinto emerges as the spiritual framework for this Bushido revival. The emperor becomes not merely a political leader, but a divine figure whose ancestors stretch back to the sun goddess herself. Serving the emperor transcends ordinary loyalty. It becomes religious duty. The samurai concept of absolute devotion finds new expression in imperial worship. Military education adopts Bushido principles as the foundation of officer training. Young men study the classical texts that once guided samurai behavior. They memorize the deeds of legendary warriors. They learn that death in service to the emperor represents the highest achievement possible for any Japanese citizen. The warrior ethos spreads throughout the armed forces. School children across Japan recite the imperial rescript on education each morning before classes begin. This document, issued in 1890, commands absolute loyalty to the emperor and nation. Students learn that individual life means nothing compared to collective duty. The samurai ideals of self-sacrifice and honor become mandatory curriculum for every Japanese child. The victories over China in 1894 and Russia in 1905 seem to validate the power of traditional Japanese values combined with modern technology. Foreign observers marvel at Japanese soldiers who charge enemy positions with apparent indifference to death. They attribute this courage to the samurai heritage that continues flowing in Japanese veins. The warrior legacy becomes a source of national pride and international recognition. Yamato Damashi, the spirit of Japan, becomes the term that encompasses all the traditional virtues supposedly inherited from the samurai. Courage, loyalty, self-sacrifice, and devotion to emperor represent the unique characteristics that distinguish Japanese people from all other nations. These qualities make Japan invincible against any enemy, no matter how powerful. The military develops increasingly elaborate codes of behavior based on idealized samurai traditions. The Senjinkan, or Field Service Code, issued in 1941, commands soldiers never to surrender under any circumstances. Death becomes preferable to capture. These regulations transform suicide from personal choice into military obligation. The samurai practice of seppuku becomes institutionalized as national policy. Industrial modernization proceeds alongside this spiritual traditionalism. Japan builds modern factories and develops advanced technology. But the workers in these facilities and the engineers who design them carry the warrior spirit in their hearts. They serve the emperor through industrial production just as their ancestors served through military prowess. The samurai ethos adapts to peacetime occupations. The concept of the Japanese family state emerges during this period as the political expression of samurai loyalty. The emperor serves as father to his people. Citizens owe him the same devotion children show their parents. This familial metaphor justifies absolute obedience while creating emotional bonds that transcend rational calculation. Military expansion into Korea, Manchuria, and eventually throughout East Asia receives justification through samurai ideals. Japan fights to liberate Asian peoples from Western imperialism. The warrior spirit that once served feudal lords now serves the cause of racial liberation. Traditional values support modern imperial ambitions. The attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 represents the ultimate expression of this militarized Bushido. Japanese naval aviators strike without warning in the manner of medieval samurai warriors. They demonstrate courage, skill, and absolute devotion to their emperor. The surprise attack embodies everything the modern military believes about inherited Japanese character, but the Pacific War reveals the limitations of spiritual strength when confronted by overwhelming material power. American industrial capacity produces weapons and equipment that Japanese courage cannot overcome. Traditional values prove insufficient against modern logistics. The warrior spirit cannot compensate for technological disadvantages. The kamikaze attacks of 1944-1945 represent both the apotheosis and the ultimate perversion of samurai ideals. Young pilots sacrifice their lives in deliberate suicide attacks against enemy ships. They embody perfect loyalty and supreme courage, but their deaths serve no strategic purpose beyond demonstrating Japanese determination to resist. Bushido becomes a cult of meaningless death. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki shatter the myth of Japanese spiritual superiority. No amount of traditional virtue can defend against nuclear weapons. The emperor himself announces surrender to prevent complete national destruction. The Bushido that promised victory delivers only devastation. Emperor Hirohito's surrender, broadcast on August 15, 1945, marks the end of militaristic Bushido as national ideology. The divine emperor admits defeat and calls for peace. The warrior spirit that was supposed to make Japan invincible has led instead to national catastrophe. The samurai legacy faces its greatest crisis since the Meiji Restoration. General MacArthur stands in the ruins of Tokyo as American occupation forces begin reshaping defeated Japan. The old order has collapsed completely. The emperor remains, but his divinity disappears. The military dissolves in disgrace. The Bushido that promised eternal victory lies shattered like the cities destroyed by American bombers. But something remarkable happens in the decades that follow Japan's surrender. The samurai spirit that seemed discredited forever finds new expression in peaceful pursuits. The warrior way adapts once again to changed circumstances. What emerges is neither the feudal Bushido of medieval Japan nor the militaristic distortion of the imperial period, but something genuinely valuable for the modern world. The new Japanese constitution of 1947 renounces war forever as a means of settling international disputes. Japan will never again maintain military forces for aggressive purposes. The samurai tradition of martial prowess must find outlets other than actual warfare. This constitutional pacifism forces a fundamental re-examination of warrior values. Martial arts experience unprecedented growth during the occupation period and afterward. Judo, kendo, karate, and aikido develop into systematic disciplines that preserve samurai principles while eliminating their violent applications. These arts spread throughout Japan and eventually around the world as ways of cultivating character, rather than preparation for battle. Hollywood discovers the samurai during the 1950s and creates global fascination with Japanese warrior culture. Films like Seven Samurai by Akira Kurosawa present idealized visions of noble warriors who fight for justice rather than personal gain. These movies export romanticized samurai images that capture international imagination. The collaboration between Kurosawa and Western filmmakers creates a feedback loop that influences both Japanese and global understanding of samurai culture. The Magnificent Seven adapts Seven Samurai for American audiences. Star Wars incorporates samurai themes and imagery. The warrior tradition becomes part of world popular culture. Martial arts schools proliferate throughout the United States and Europe as interest in Japanese culture grows. Students learn not only fighting techniques, but also philosophical principles derived from samurai traditions. Concepts of honor, discipline, and self-improvement appeal to Western audiences seeking meaning in materialistic societies. Japanese business practices during the post-war economic miracle reflect adapted samurai values. Companies emphasize loyalty between employers and employees. They stress long-term relationships over short-term profits. They cultivate corporate cultures based on mutual obligation and collective responsibility. The warrior ethos transforms into management philosophy. The concept of lifetime employment becomes characteristic of Japanese corporations during their period of rapid growth. Workers pledge devotion to their companies in exchange for job security and gradual advancement. This employment system creates stable relationships that benefit both parties while preserving traditional social bonds in modern contexts. Quality control movements like total quality management adapt samurai perfectionism for industrial applications. Japanese manufacturers pursue excellence with the same dedication their ancestors showed in sword making. The attention to detail and commitment to continuous improvement reflect warrior values applied to commercial production. International business schools begin studying Japanese management techniques to understand the sources of economic success. They identify the influence of samurai traditions in corporate cultures that emphasize teamwork, loyalty, and long-term planning. Traditional values become competitive advantages in global markets. The global spread of martial arts accelerates during the 1970s and 1980s as popular culture embraces Asian fighting disciplines. Karate schools open in suburban shopping centers. University programs include courses in Eastern philosophy and martial arts. The samurai influence reaches ordinary people throughout the developed world. Modern Japanese identity struggles with the complex legacy of the samurai tradition. The warrior past includes both admirable ideals and dangerous extremism. Contemporary Japan must preserve valuable elements while rejecting militaristic distortions. This process of selective cultural preservation continues evolving. Anime and manga export Japanese cultural values to global audiences through popular entertainment. Stories featuring samurai characters or warrior themes reach millions of young people worldwide. These media present Japanese concepts of honor, duty, and self-improvement in accessible formats that transcend cultural boundaries. Video games incorporate samurai imagery and philosophy for international markets. Players around the world experience virtual versions of warrior training and combat. These interactive media allow people to explore Japanese cultural values through entertainment. The samurai tradition adapts to digital age technologies. Academic study of Japanese history and culture expands dramatically as Japan's international influence grows. Universities establish programs in Japanese studies that examine samurai traditions alongside contemporary society. Scholarly research reveals the complexity and diversity of actual warrior culture beyond popular stereotypes. Tourism to Japan increasingly includes visits to samurai-related historical sites. Reconstructed castles, preserved samurai districts, and martial arts demonstrations attract millions of international visitors. The warrior heritage becomes a source of cultural soft power that enhances Japan's global influence. As we reach the end of our journey through 15 centuries of samurai history, we find ourselves facing questions that transcend any particular time or culture. What can the way of the warrior teach us about living meaningful lives in the 21st century? How do ancient ideals of honor and duty apply to modern challenges? The answers lie not in the specific practices of feudal Japan, but in the universal human struggles that samurai culture addressed. The samurai understood that true strength comes from self-discipline rather than external power. Their daily training regimens developed not only physical skills, but also mental fortitude and emotional control. Modern life offers countless distractions and temptations that can lead us away from our goals. The samurai example teaches us that achievement requires consistent practice and the ability to delay gratification for long-term benefits. Personal discipline begins with small daily choices that accumulate over time into significant character development. The samurai practiced calligraphy, poetry, and meditation alongside swordsmanship because they understood that excellence in any field requires cultivation of the whole person. We can apply this principle by pursuing learning and self-improvement even when immediate benefits are not apparent. The concept of service above self-interest remains relevant in our individualistic age. Samurai derived meaning from serving something greater than their personal desires. Whether that service was directed toward feudal lords, the emperor, or abstract ideals of justice, it provided purpose that transcended material concerns. Modern leaders can learn from this example by focusing on the needs of their organizations, communities, and society, rather than purely personal advancement. Aesthetic refinement played a crucial role in samurai culture because they understood that appreciation of beauty develops sensitivity and emotional intelligence. The warrior who could compose poetry or arrange flowers possessed skills that enhanced his effectiveness in all areas of life. Contemporary education and professional development often neglect artistic cultivation, but the samurai example suggests that aesthetic experience contributes to overall human development. The pursuit of excellence through continuous improvement characterized every aspect of samurai training. They practiced sword techniques thousands of times to achieve perfect form. They studied strategy and philosophy to deepen their understanding. They refined their aesthetic sensibilities to appreciate subtle distinctions in beauty. This commitment to mastery offers guidance for anyone seeking to excel in their chosen field. The samurai developed sophisticated approaches to balancing competing loyalties and obligations. They served their immediate lords while maintaining broader duties to family, society, and moral principles. When these obligations conflicted, they faced difficult choices that required careful judgment rather than blind obedience. Modern professionals often face similar dilemmas between personal advancement and ethical considerations. The integration of spiritual practice with practical activities distinguished samurai culture from purely military traditions. They used meditation to develop mental clarity for combat decisions. They approached martial arts as paths to self-understanding rather than merely methods of violence. This holistic approach offers alternatives to modern tendencies to separate professional life from personal growth. Finding purpose during peaceful times challenged the samurai class throughout the Edo period. Warriors trained for battles that never came. They maintained martial readiness while serving as administrators and scholars. Their experience demonstrates that meaningful activity requires adaptation to changing circumstances, while preserving core values and principles. The samurai emphasis on accepting mortality paradoxically enhanced their appreciation for life. By confronting the reality of death through constant training and philosophical reflection, they developed perspectives that reduced anxiety about temporary setbacks. This acceptance of impermanence can help modern people deal with career changes, relationship challenges, and the normal difficulties of human existence. The warrior path ultimately teaches us that external circumstances matter less than our responses to those circumstances. Samurai faced warfare, political upheaval, and social transformation while maintaining their commitment to honor and duty. Their example suggests that personal integrity can survive any external challenge if we remain committed to our fundamental principles. The global influence of samurai ideals demonstrates their universal relevance beyond Japanese culture. People throughout the world find inspiration in stories of warriors who combined strength with gentleness, courage with compassion, and martial skill with artistic refinement. These timeless qualities appeal to basic human aspirations for meaning and excellence. The cherry blossoms that symbolize the samurai way continue to bloom each spring in parks and gardens around the world. Their brief beauty reminds us that all things pass away, but their annual return promises renewal and hope. The samurai tradition itself demonstrates this cycle of death and rebirth, as each generation adapts ancient wisdom to contemporary needs. The way of the warrior persists not as nostalgia for a vanished past, but as guidance for creating a meaningful future. In boardrooms and classrooms, hospitals and laboratories, the principles developed by medieval Japanese warriors continue helping people find purpose, develop character, and serve others. The samurai are gone, but their way endures. As our journey through samurai history concludes, we carry with us the wisdom of centuries. The morning mist that once shrouded castle courtyards now rises from cities around the globe, where people strive to live with honor and purpose. The spirit that animated those ancient warriors lives on in every person who chooses service over selfishness, excellence over mediocrity, and growth over stagnation. The way of the warrior calls to us still, not to take up swords, but to take up the greater challenge of becoming fully realized human beings. In this peaceful age, we can all be samurai in the truest sense, disciplined servants of ideals greater than ourselves, cultivating beauty while maintaining strength, preparing for challenges while appreciating present blessings. The path remains open to all who have the courage to walk it. We have travelled through 15 centuries together. We have walked beside warriors as they emerged from rice fields and transformed into poets. We have witnessed the birth and death of dynasties. We have seen swords give way to rifles, horses to railways, castles to cities. But now, in the quiet that follows our long journey, we must ask the deepest questions of all. What does it mean to be human in a world that demands both strength and gentleness? How do we balance our individual desires with our duties to others? Why does the story of these long-vanished warriors still stir something in our hearts across centuries and cultures? The samurai created something unique in human history. They were the only warrior class to systematically cultivate beauty alongside brutality. They wrote poetry between battles. They arrange flowers with the same precision they used to arrange battle formations. They practiced tea ceremony with hands that had wielded swords just hours before. This paradox reveals something profound about the human condition itself. We are all warrior poets in our own lives. We must fight daily battles against circumstances, setbacks, and our own limitations. But we also hunger for beauty, meaning, and transcendence. The samurai discovered that these opposing forces need not cancel each other out. Instead, they can create a dynamic tension that generates extraordinary human achievement. The aesthetic dimension of samurai life was never mere decoration. It served essential psychological and spiritual functions. A warrior who could appreciate the subtle beauty of morning mist possessed the sensitivity needed to read battlefield conditions accurately. One who could compose elegant poetry had developed the mental discipline required for strategic thinking. Beauty training was warrior training by another name. This integration of aesthetic cultivation with practical effectiveness offers profound lessons for modern leadership. The executive who studies art develops pattern recognition skills that enhance business judgment. The physician who practices music improves the manual dexterity needed for surgery. The teacher who writes poetry gains emotional intelligence that helps connect with students. Excellence in any field requires development of the whole human being. The samurai approach to loyalty reveals both its power and its dangers. Absolute devotion to a cause greater than oneself can inspire magnificent achievements. It can motivate people to sacrifice personal comfort for collective benefit. It can create organizations where trust eliminates the need for constant supervision. But uncritical loyalty can also enable terrible abuses when leaders betray the trust placed in them. The key lies in understanding that true loyalty serves principles rather than personalities. The samurai at their best served ideals of justice, honor, and protection of the innocent. When individual lords violated these principles, the highest loyalty sometimes required opposition to immediate superiors. Modern organizations need people who will speak truth to power when necessary, even at personal cost. The search for meaning through service to something greater than ourselves represents perhaps the samurai tradition's most valuable contribution to human understanding. In our individualistic age, we often assume that personal fulfillment comes from satisfying our own desires. The warrior way suggests a different path. Purpose emerges from dedicating our abilities to causes that will outlast our individual lives. This service can take countless forms in the modern world. Parents serve their children's future, teachers serve learning, doctors serve healing, artists serve beauty, scientists serve truth. The specific cause matters less than the quality of dedication we bring to it. The samurai discovered that meaning comes not from what we receive, but from what we give. The continuing global fascination with samurai culture stems from its relevance to universal human struggles. Every person faces moments that test their courage. Everyone must choose between immediate pleasure and long-term benefit. All of us struggle to balance competing obligations to family, work, and community. The samurai experience provides templates for navigating these eternal dilemmas. The warrior's relationship with death illuminates their approach to life. By accepting mortality completely, the samurai freed themselves from the anxiety that prevents most people from fully engaging with their circumstances. They could commit completely to present tasks without worrying about future consequences. This acceptance of impermanence paradoxically enabled them to create works of lasting beauty and significance. Modern life often involves elaborate strategies for avoiding thoughts of death. We pursue health, wealth, and security as if these things could grant immortality. The samurai way suggests that accepting our finite nature actually enhances our capacity for achievement and happiness. When we stop trying to control uncontrollable outcomes, we can focus our energy on the choices that actually matter. The discipline that characterized samurai training offers guidance for personal development in any era. They understood that excellence requires consistent practice over extended periods. They knew that small daily improvements accumulate into significant transformation. They accepted that mastery demands patience and persistence rather than dramatic breakthroughs. These principles apply whether we seek to improve our physical fitness, professional skills, or emotional maturity. The path of gradual refinement that the samurai followed in their martial arts can guide us in developing any capability. The key is maintaining consistency even when progress seems slow or invisible. The samurai integration of spiritual practice with worldly activity provides alternatives to modern tendencies to separate different aspects of life. They approached every task as an opportunity for self-cultivation. Sword practice became meditation in motion. Administrative duties offered chances to serve others. Even mundane activities carried potential for developing awareness and character. This holistic approach suggests that we can find opportunities for growth in whatever circumstances we face. The office worker can practice mindfulness during routine tasks. The parent can develop patience through childcare responsibilities. The student can cultivate discipline through academic requirements. Every moment offers possibilities for becoming more fully human. The way of the warrior ultimately teaches us that external circumstances matter less than our internal responses to those circumstances. The samurai faced warfare, natural disasters, political upheaval, and social transformation while maintaining their commitment to honor and excellence. Their example demonstrates that personal integrity can survive any challenge if we remain committed to our fundamental values. This lesson provides hope for navigating the uncertainties of contemporary life. Economic volatility, technological disruption, and social change create anxiety for people throughout the modern world. The samurai experience suggests that we can find stability within ourselves even when everything around us shifts. Our character becomes our castle, providing security that no external force can destroy. The cherry blossom imagery that runs throughout samurai culture reminds us that beauty often emerges from accepting transience rather than fighting it. The flowers are most beautiful precisely because they fall so quickly. Their brief blooming becomes precious because we know it cannot last. This insight applies to all human experience. Our relationships, achievements, and even our own lives gain meaning partly through their temporary nature. The samurai who could appreciate this paradox found peace with the human condition. They could fight fiercely while accepting that all victories are temporary. They could love deeply while knowing that all relationships end. They could build carefully while recognizing that all structures eventually crumble. As our journey through samurai history concludes, we return to the questions that began our exploration. How do we live with honor in difficult times? How do we balance strength with compassion? How do we find meaning in a world that often seems chaotic and purposeless? The samurai offer no simple answers to these eternal questions. Instead, they provide examples of how human beings can struggle with these dilemmas while maintaining dignity and purpose. They show us that the journey matters more than any final destination. The way we travel our path shapes us more profoundly than wherever that path might lead. The morning mist that opened our story continues to rise from valleys and rivers throughout the world. It reminds us that clarity emerges gradually from confusion. Understanding develops slowly through patient observation and reflection. The truths that matter most cannot be grasped quickly, but must be lived into through years of dedicated practice. The samurai way calls to us still, not as historical curiosity but as living possibility. We may never carry swords or serve feudal lords, but we can cultivate discipline, pursue excellence, serve others, and seek beauty in ordinary moments. We can face our own mortality with courage while cherishing the time we have been given. In this sense, we are all potential samurai. The path remains open to anyone willing to walk it with sincerity and dedication. The cherry blossoms will fall again this spring as they have for centuries, but their beauty will return, as it always has, and somewhere in quiet moments of reflection, the warrior spirit stirs in hearts that have never held a sword, but understand the eternal human longing for honor, meaning, and transcendence. The way of the warrior leads not to any final destination, but to the continuous journey of becoming fully human. This path stretches before us always, calling us forward into greater understanding of ourselves and our place in the vast mystery of existence. The samurai have shown us that this journey, undertaken with proper spirit, is itself the greatest victory we can achieve.